The first thing you feel as a 1920s Cincinnati Label Gummer is the cool paste tack against your fingers as the morning bench becomes yours. Settle in and let the slow work find its pace around you. We are in a printing room near the river, where paper, steam heat, ink, and flour glue make a soft, familiar air. You stand beside a long wooden table, worn pale at the edges by years of hands and sleeves. The window glass holds a little gray daylight, and beyond it, Cincinnati is waking under coal smoke and damp brick. Your apron is already tied, your cuffs are turned back, and the stack of printed labels waits in a clean, square pile. They might be for a jar of pickles, a tin of baking powder, a carton of soap, or a bottle from some local maker whose name is set in careful red and blue ink. In this 1920s Cincinnati Label room, your place is not loud or grand, but it belongs to the hidden life of every shop shelf. Before a label can shine on glass or tin, before a clerk can set it in a window, somebody has to give its back a thin, even coat of gum. That somebody is you tonight, and will stay close to the bench, where the brush moves, the paper settles, and nothing needs to hurry. The paste pot rests in a warm jacket near your right hand. It smells faintly sweet, like wet flour and old envelopes, with a sharper trace of sizing from the paper. When you lift the brush, the bristles bend with a small weight, and a clear, cloudy thread falls back into the pot. You tap it once on the rim. The sound is soft, almost private, just a muted click beneath the larger room. Around you, the print shop breathes in its own slow way. Somewhere behind a partition, a press turns with a low iron rhythm, and the floor gives a tiny shiver each time the mechanism takes its bite. You hear paper lifted, stacked, counted, and turned. You hear a foreman cough once into the morning air, then the scratch of a pencil on an order slip. The day begins by measuring itself. Your first task is simple enough to explain, though it takes patience to do well. You take a sheet of labels, already printed in neat rows, and lay it face down on the gumming board. You smooth it from the center outward with the heel of your hand, feeling for any curl or lifted corner. Then you draw the brush across the back, not too wet, not too dry, letting the gum cover the paper in a shine that disappears almost as soon as it arrives. If the gum is heavy, the label will buckle when it dries. If it is thin, the corners may lift later from a box or bottle. So your hand learns the middle way, that quiet craft between too much and not enough. You don't think of it as skill at first. You think of it as doing the same motion again and again, until the sheet tells you what it needs. The gum itself may be made from dextrin, starch, or gum arabic, depending on the order and the price. In the 1920s, every shop has its own small preferences, its mixtures and habits, its remarks about what holds best in damp weather. Cincinnati has river air, factory air, cellar air, summer thunder air, and all of it can change how paper behaves. You learn this without anyone making a lesson of it. You learn because the paper curls differently on a wet morning. A label gummer is part worker, part listener. You listen to the brush drag over paper. You listen for the faint scrape that means it is running dry. You watch the sheen beneath the window light, and you know when to dip again. We can stay with that motion for a while, because it is the sort of motion that asks very little from the mind, once the hands have found it. The room is not silent, but its noises are steady. A cart rolls past the doorway with stacks of flat stock, its wheels making a wooden rattle over a seam in the floorboards. A man at the cutter lowers a blade with a firm, smooth pull, and the cut paper gives a brief sigh. You can smell machine oil, damp wool coats, ink, paste, and the coffee someone has brought in a tin cup. The whole morning sits inside those smells. Your bench has its own small geography. The ungummed sheets wait on the left, square and clean. The paste pot sits close, but not close enough to tip. The brush lies across a shallow tray, when you aren't using it, and beyond that, the drying racks stand open like narrow wooden ladders. Each place has a purpose. Each movement saves a little strain. You lift the first gummed sheet by two corners and carry it carefully to the rack. The paper is limp for a moment, and you feel the dampness trying to pull it out of shape. You lay it over a line or slide it onto a screen, depending on how the shop has arranged the drying space. Then you return to the table and begin again. The rhythm is plain, and the plainness is what makes it restful. By now, we can imagine the city outside without leaving your hands. Streetcars move along their tracks with a bell at the corner, and horses still appear now and then among the motor trucks. The Ohio River lies not far away, broad and work brown, carrying barges, damp wind, and the old habit of trade. Cincinnati has always known labels, crates, bottles, boxes, and barrels. Goods pass through, and every one of them needs a name. Your job touches all of that, though quietly. A printed label is a promise made visible. It tells a grocer what's inside a carton. It tells a housewife which jar has apple butter and which has mustard. It tells a clerk where to set the tins. But before the label can do its talking, you give it the means to hold fast. You give it gum, pressure, drying time, and a flat place to wait. The morning settles deeper into its routine, and the first chill leaves your fingers as the paste pot warms beside you. Your shoulders loosen. Your breath begins to match the brush. Draw, lift, dip, draw. The words on the face of the label are hidden from you while you work, but you know they are there, resting against the board. Sometimes color bleeds faintly through the paper, a pale red shadow, a little blue border, a gold seal that catches the light at the edge. There is a humility in working from the back of things. You don't decorate the front. You don't choose the typeface or the picture of fruit, grain, soap bubbles, or a shining bottle. You work on the side nobody studies, the side that touches glass, tin, cardboard, or wood. Yet the hidden side matters. We know this, standing here with gum on your brush and paper beneath your hand. Many useful things are quiet because they are meant to stay in place. When the first rack is nearly full, the room has grown warmer, and the daylight has thickened against the windows. You pause long enough to flex your fingers. A little gum has dried near the base of your thumb, leaving a tight, glossy patch that pulls at the skin. You rub it loose with a damp rag. The rag smells sour-sweet from repeated use, and the water in the small basin has gone cloudy. The next batch is waiting with a different paper. You notice it at once. This stock is thinner, more eager to curl, and the edges whisper when you lift them. The order slip says the labels are meant for small round tins, so they must bend later without cracking. You keep the gum light, and you work from the middle toward the edges with softer strokes. The sheet responds. It lies down, accepts the paste, and rises with only a slight wave. A label gummer in 1920s Cincinnati has to know these differences by feel. Heavy paper drinks slowly. Cheap paper drinks too fast. Glossy paper resists for a moment, then takes the gum unevenly if you push the brush too hard. Your fingers become your gauge. Your eyes become scales. The work is repetitive, but it isn't empty. It is full of small corrections, so small that only you may notice them. And as the morning wears on, the first easy rhythm of the bench gives way to the quieter judgment of keeping every sheet alike. The shop clock has a round face and black hands, and it moves with a patience that seems made for rooms like this. You don't watch it constantly, but you feel its presence above the doorway. At 9:30, someone opens the back door, and cold air rolls across the floor at ankle height. It carries river damp, coal soot, and the faint smell of wet rope from a loading dock. Then the door closes, and the paste smell returns. Your supervisor brings over a note from the printing side. The ink on one order is still a little soft. You can't gum those sheets yet, or the printed fronts may offset when stacked later. So you set them aside and take up another bundle. This is part of the work too, waiting without wasting the morning. A good shop is a place where timing is handled quietly, by hands that understand how long paper needs. The labels in front of you now are for canned tomatoes, printed with a bright farm scene that you only glimpse when a corner turns. You are in Cincinnati, but the picture shows a red barn, green vines, and a field that looks much cleaner than any real field after rain. Such pictures are part of the trade. They bring sunlit order to a shelf. You smile a little, perhaps, because your own world at this moment is paste, benches, damp sleeves, and the faint squeak of a drying rack. The brush is wider than 2 fingers and worn into a shape that suits the work. Its handle is smooth where palms have held it for years. Near the metal ferrule, Old gum has darkened into amber ridges. You know the weight of it now. When the bristles are full, your wrist drops slightly. When they empty, the brush lightens, and the sound changes. It's not something anyone needs to tell you. The tool speaks softly enough for a tired mind. We stay beside you as the second rack fills. Each sheet goes out flat, glistening for a breath, then dulling as the gum begins to settle. In winter, drying can be slow. In summer, it can happen too quickly at the edges. The shop may use fans, open windows, warm shelves, or simple time, depending on the weather and the money at hand. Today, the air is mild enough. The sheets breathe themselves dry without complaint. There are little habits that make the hours easier. You keep the pile squared by tapping it gently against the table. You wipe the brush handle before it grows slippery. You turn your feet now and then to ease the pull in your back. You do these things almost without thinking, and we can feel the comfort of that. A body at work makes its own knowledge, and much of it never gets written down. At some point, a messenger boy comes in with a paper-wrapped sandwich for one of the pressmen. The smell of onion and mustard reaches your bench, sharp and homely. Someone jokes quietly about the Reds, or the weather, or a delivery wagon stuck near Vine Street. The talk drifts and fades. Nobody expects you to answer with your hands full. The brush keeps moving, and the room's small society folds itself around the work. You may have brought your own lunch in waxed paper, tucked into a metal pail or a cloth bag near the wall. Maybe it's bread with cheese, or cold meat, or a slice of cake wrapped from home. The thought of it sits gently in the morning, not as a craving but as a mark on the day's path. Before lunch, there are more sheets. After lunch, there will be more again. That's the shape of it, and the shape is strangely kind. The gumming room teaches you that sameness is never perfectly the same. One sheet lies flat, another has a stubborn corner. One batch of paste runs smooth, another thickens as it cools. One stack has clean edges, another was cut with a blade that needed sharpening. You notice these small variations, and they keep you company. They are like changes in breathing, slight, ordinary, real. By late morning, the racks stand in rows of pale paperbacks, and the air has taken on a damp warmth. Your apron carries a few stiff spots where paste has dried. The cuffs of your shirt feel heavier. Your fingers are clean enough for work, but never fully clean. Not until the day is done and warm water has had time to soften what the paste has left behind. You belong to the material for now, and the material belongs to you. When the lunch whistle sounds somewhere deeper in the building, the brush pauses at the rim of the pot, and the whole room seems to loosen by one quiet notch. You cover the paste before stepping away, because a skin can form on top if it sits open too long. The cover is dented tin, cool at the edges and tacky in the middle. You lay the brush in water so the bristles won't harden. Then you straighten the stack, wipe the table, and look once along the drying racks. It is a small inspection, not grand, but it matters. You leave the work in order before you leave it at all. The lunchroom, if the shop has one, is plain and warm from many bodies. If it doesn't, you find a place near a window, a crate, or a corner where the air is less full of paste. In 1920s Cincinnati, workers eat close to their work because the day is shaped by bells, not leisure. You unwrap your food and hold it in fingers that still smell faintly of gum. Bread has a dry softness. Coffee tastes a little metallic from the cup. We can sit with you there for a moment. The room is full of low voices, chair legs, paper rustle, and the scrape of a pocket knife through an apple peel. Someone reads a newspaper folded small. Someone leans back with eyes half shut. Outside, trucks shift on the street, and a streetcar bell sends its clear note through the window glass. Nothing dramatic happens. The day simply pauses, and the pause has its own texture. Your hands rest in your lap, and you feel how much they have already done. The work of gumming labels doesn't call attention to itself, but the body keeps count. The fingers know the press of paper corners. The wrist knows the arc of the brush. The shoulders know the height of the bench. Even sitting still, you can feel the motion continue faintly inside you, like a tune remembered after the music stops. Across from you, another worker may be picking dried adhesive from a thumbnail. Someone from the composing room has bits of lead dust darkening the skin around his nails. A press feeder has ink along one cuff. These marks are ordinary badges in a printing house, but nobody says that out loud. You see them because your own hands are marked too. Work leaves traces, and in a place like this, traces are understood. When lunch is over, there is no sharp return. People rise slowly, cups are rinsed, wrappers are folded, a chair is pushed back under a table with a dull scrape. You go back to the bench, and the air of the gumming room receives you again. Warmer now, a little sweeter, as though the paste has been waiting. The cover lifts with a soft pull. The surface beneath is smooth. You stir it once and watch the shine gather. The afternoon order is larger. These labels are for a line of household polish, and the sheets come in heavy bundles tied with cord. The printed fronts show careful lettering and maybe a small image of a shining stove or table leg, something meant to promise cleanliness to anyone passing a store window. You see only quick flashes as you turn the stack. Then the backs face up, plain and thirsty, and the old rhythm begins again. A large order changes the feeling of time. In the morning, you may notice each batch separately. In the afternoon, the work becomes a long, steady field. Sheet follows sheet, rack follows rack. Your breath moves with your arm. We stay near, not to hurry you, but to notice how the body settles when it knows what comes next. The room seems to narrow to paper, paste, brush, lift, carry, lay, return. There is a quiet economy in every motion. Too much reach wastes strength. Too little care wastes stock. You learn to slide the stack close without crowding your elbow. You set the drying rack at an angle that saves a step. You keep the brush moving before the gum thickens on the bristles. None of these choices looks impressive from a doorway, yet together they make the difference between a strained day and a bearable one. By afternoon, the light through the high windows turns flatter and whiter, and the Cincinnati Label Gummer's work becomes a matter of endurance as much as touch. The floorboards near your bench have dark seams where dust and paste have settled over years. When you shift your weight, one board answers with a low creak. Your shoes have taken on a faint tack at the soles, enough that each step releases with a small whisper. The smell of warm adhesive has deepened. It clings to cloth and hair, not unpleasant exactly, but steady. You'll carry it home later like a quiet reminder. The paste must be watched more closely now. Warmth from the room and repeated dipping can change its feel. You add a little water from a pitcher, just enough to loosen it, and stir with a flat wooden paddle. The mixture folds over itself slowly. It has the look of thin cream and the resistance of something alive only in the practical sense, changing because heat and air change everything. Your hand tests it before the next sheet. The brush confirms it. There's a kindness in tools that answer honestly. Paper tells you when it is too wet. A brush tells you when it is clogged. A rack tells you when it is full. Even the paste tells you when it has gone dull. We don't need to make the work larger than it is. Its dignity is already there, in the attention it asks, and in the usefulness it gives back. You take another sheet and lay it down. The table surface is smooth, but not perfect, and you know the little dip near the back corner. You avoid letting thin paper settle there, because gum can pool where the board sinks. Instead, you turn the sheet slightly and smooth it with your palm. That small adjustment may save a batch from wrinkling. Nobody may notice. You notice, and that is enough. The shop has rules, spoken and unspoken. Keep wet sheets away from dust. Don't stack too soon. Don't let pasted edges touch. Don't leave a brush standing on its bristles. Don't talk over the foreman when he's counting. Don't borrow another worker's rag without asking. These are not grand laws, only the little fence rails that keep a day from becoming tangled. You follow them because they make the work gentler for everyone. Some labels will be re-wetted later and applied by hand, perhaps with a sponge at a packing table or with a quick swipe across a damp pad. Some may go to factories where women and men label tins by the hundreds, pressing the gummed backs onto metal with practiced speed. Your part comes before theirs. You prepare the sleeping adhesive, dry on the paper for now, ready to wake when dampened. It's a quiet kind of promise. The word gum has a simple feel in the mouth. It belongs to trees, envelopes, stamps, labels, school paste, and the little sticky repairs of everyday life. In your room, it is part of industry, but it keeps that household nearness. It smells like a kitchen and a workshop at once. That mixture suits Cincinnati, with its factories tucked among homes, its hills rising behind streets, its river carrying both commerce and weather. As the afternoon continues, conversation thins. The press still turns. The cutter still drops. Someone whistles for a few bars and then forgets the tune. You can hear a clock tick during the brief gaps between heavier sounds. Your own motions grow quieter too, because tired hands often become more careful. The brush no longer feels separate from you. It is just the soft end of an old, repeated thought. A fresh stack arrives with paper wrappers still tight around it. The cord has bitten slightly into the edges, leaving shallow impressions. You cut it and ease the bundle open. The sheets have the dry, close smell of stored paper, almost dusty, with a trace of ink. They slide against one another in a whispering block. You square them, place the first sheet down, and begin the same patient conversation with a new surface. Now and then, you look toward the drying racks and judge which sheets can be moved. A gummed label must be dry enough not to smear or stick, but not so curled that it will fight the stack. You lift one corner and feel for coolness. Damp paper often feels cooler than dry paper. Your fingertips become thermometers, moisture gauges, and inspectors all at once. The knowledge is humble, but it's precise. We are still in the 1920s Cincinnati Label Room, and the afternoon is doing what afternoons do in places of steady labor. It stretches, softens, and asks you to keep faith with the next small task. Outside, the city has gone on without you. People buy meat, mail letters, board streetcars, sweep stoops, argue over prices, and carry parcels wrapped in brown paper. Inside, you gum the backs of labels that may touch all those lives by the end of the week. There is comfort in being one hand among many. The designer made the lettering. The typesetter locked the form. The pressman watched the ink. The cutter trimmed the sheets. You gum them. Someone else will pack them. Someone else will paste them to jars, tins, boxes, or bottles. No single person holds the whole chain, yet the chain holds because each worker does the next thing well. That can be enough for a day. When the light begins to angle lower and the gum pot needs one last careful stir, the work turns toward finishing rather than beginning. You begin to think differently when the end of a batch is near. The first sheet of the day had asked you to settle in, but these later sheets ask you to remain steady. Your wrist has a little ache in it now, low and familiar, and the paste has left a pale shine along one knuckle. Still, the Cincinnati Label Gummer's bench keeps its old rhythm, and you follow it with the quiet patience of someone who knows the work will end only by being done. The finishing part is not simply using up what remains in the stack, it means looking more closely at what has already passed through your hands. You walk along the drying racks, touching corners lightly, feeling for cool dampness and places where gum has dried too thick. Some sheets lie obediently flat, while others lift at the edges like leaves beginning to curl. You choose which ones may come down and which ones need another stretch of air. A dried sheet has a different voice from a wet one. When you lift it, it gives a dry, papery murmur, not the soft sag of fresh gum. The back feels smooth, but faintly toothy, as though the paste has become part of the paper rather than something resting on top. You hold the sheet near the window and tilt it, watching for dull streaks, shiny patches, and missed corners. The light shows what the hand might have overlooked. We stay with you in this slower inspection, because this is where routine becomes care. A label that looks fine in the stack can fail later at the edge of a jar. A heavy patch can wrinkle when re-wetted. A dry strip can lift from a box as soon as the air turns damp. You don't make a fuss about it. You only set aside the doubtful sheets, square the good ones, and let the day keep moving. The shop may have a small rework pile for sheets that need attention. You take one of them back to the bench and give a narrow edge a touch of gum, using the brush almost sideways. It is delicate work, quieter than the broad strokes of the morning. Your breath slows when you do it. The bristles leave a thin shine, exactly where the paper had gone bare, and for a moment the whole room seems to narrow to that one repaired corner. There is satisfaction in saving a sheet. Paper costs money, ink costs money, time costs money, though nobody in the room says it in those terms as often as they feel it. In a 1920s Cincinnati printing shop, Waste is not dramatic, but it is noticed. A good label gummer doesn't merely spread paste. You help the shop keep its materials in line, sheet by sheet, without calling attention to yourself. The bundles that are ready must be stacked carefully. You line the sheets with the gummed backs facing the same way, making sure the edges meet cleanly. If the gum has dried well, they won't cling, but you still handle them with respect. Paper has a memory for rough treatment. It remembers bent corners, thumb dents, careless pressure, and damp places where hands rested too long. Your own hands become lighter because of that. You tap the stack against the table, first on one edge, then another. The sound is a firm, dry pat, pleasant in its neatness. A square stack is easier for the cutter, the packer, or the next worker down the line. You turn it, press it, and watch the edges become one clean block. There is a small relief in that, the relief of disorder brought back into shape by nothing more than attention. By now, the late afternoon air has grown thicker with warm paste and dust. The windows show a softer city, brick walls losing their hard edges, smoke flattening into the upper air. Somewhere outside, a truck changes gear with a strained growl, and a streetcar bell answers from a corner you can't see. The sounds reach you dimly, as though wrapped in paper. Inside, the drying racks stand like narrow shelves of pale weather. The next part of the work belongs to counting, and counting can be a lullaby of its own when nobody rushes it. You count sheets by touch, lifting small groups and letting the corners fall under your thumb. 5, 10, 15, 20, though you may say the words only in your head. Since we are keeping the evening calm, we can feel how the numbers become less like arithmetic and more like a measured breath. You stack them into lots, depending on the order. Some customers want a few hundred labels for a short run. Others need thousands, bundled tight and wrapped for delivery. In the 1920s, a Cincinnati grocer, brewer turned soft drink maker, soap house or packing firm might depend on these stacks arriving clean and flat. Your work has to travel well. The gum must hold in silence until someone calls upon it. The wrapping paper is brown and slightly coarse. It scratches softly against the backs of your fingers as you fold it around the finished stack. You bring one side over, crease it with the nail of your thumb, then fold the ends neatly, as if wrapping a parcel for a careful household. Twine waits in a ball near the table. You pull out a length, feel the fibers catch against a rough place on your skin, and tie the bundle firmly. A wrapped bundle changes character. A moment ago, it was many separate sheets, each with its own slight wave, shine, and edge. Now it is an object, squared and named, ready to move from your bench to a shelf, a cart, or a delivery room. Someone marks it with pencil or stamps it with an order number. You may not see where it goes next, but you've given it the quiet readiness it needs. And as the finished bundles begin to gather at the end of the table, the work shifts from making the gum even to keeping the whole order in faithful order. The order slips are plain, but they rule the room with gentle insistence. Each one carries the customer name, the label description, the quantity, and sometimes a note about stock, gum, or delivery. You read them with the half attention of someone who has learned which lines matter most to your hands. If the slip says bottle labels, you think about curve and dampness. If it says carton labels, you think about flat pressure and clean corners. A Cincinnati Label Gummer in the 1920s works inside a city of many small manufacturers. There are firms making soaps, candles, medicines, spices, shoes, cigars, canned goods, and hardware in buildings that smell of wood, oil, sugar, metal, or brine. Their labels come through shops like this one, bright on the front and plain on the back. You may never visit those factories, yet their needs arrive at your bench in stacks. Some labels are narrow neckbands for bottles, and they behave differently from broad square labels meant for boxes. A neckband must wrap without cracking. A box label must lie flat under pressure. A tin label may need a stronger gum if it will face handling and damp shelves. These facts settle into your body as ordinary knowledge. You don't recite them. You simply adjust the brush, the moisture, and the waiting time. There are older workers who can tell by smell when a paste has changed. You may have learned from one of them. He might have said very little, only dipped 2 fingers into the gum, rubbed them together, and nodded or frowned. In rooms like this, teaching often comes as a gesture, not a lecture. You watch, you try, you spoil a little, you improve, and eventually someone trusts you with a larger order. The paste room, if it is separate, is a humble place of kettles, pails, sacks, and steam. Dextrin may arrive as a dry powder, pale yellow or tan, made by heating starch until it changes its nature. Mixed with water, it becomes a workable adhesive, cheaper and dependable enough for many labels. Gum arabic, from tree sap dried into brittle pieces, may be used where a finer gum is wanted. You know these things through use more than study. When fresh paste comes in, it may be carried in a pail with a cloth thrown over the top. The pail handle presses into the carrier's fingers, and a warm, sweet smell follows it across the room. You see steam rise when the air is cool. The surface trembles with each step. By the time it reaches your bench, the mixture has become part of the day's small weather, warming your hands and softening the paperbacks. We can notice the modest science of it without leaving the quiet. Gum works because water lets the adhesive spread into the fibers of paper, and drying leaves it there, waiting. Later, another touch of moisture wakes it again, allowing it to cling to glass, tin, or board. It is not a mystery exactly, but it feels a little like one when you think of dry paper remembering how to stick. Your job depends on that memory. You give the label a future action it won't perform until later. That is a strange and gentle thought. Here at the bench, you are preparing a sheet for a hand you may never meet, in a packing room you may never enter, on a morning or afternoon that hasn't come yet. The work travels forward. You remain with the brush. The order slip calls for a stronger gum on a run of labels meant for jars. The jars may hold preserves, pickled vegetables, ointment, or some tonic sold in drugstores with serious lettering and promises printed small. Glass can be unforgiving if the gum is weak or badly spread. It shows bubbles. It shows lifted edges. So you take extra care, keeping the coat even and the corners clean, knowing the finished label must meet a curved, cool surface. A curved object asks more of paper than a box does. You picture the label bending around glass, the printed face smoothing under someone's palm, the gummed back softening and holding. You press the wet sheet at your bench with this future curve in mind. Though the label is flat now, its purpose is not flat. Your hand understands that in a practical, wordless way, and we let that understanding move through the brush. The sounds around you have changed again. Late in the day, machines seem louder because people speak less. The press has a steady iron breath, and belts whisper over pulleys with a dry, leathery sound. The air carries the warm bite of metal, the faint sweetness of gum, and the dusty smell of paper cuttings swept into corners. Your own bench gives off a calmer scent, wet starch and wood rubbed smooth by labor. If a sheet tears, the sound is small but unmistakable. It makes the hand pause. You look down and see where the dampened paper caught against the board or where a corner was lifted too quickly. There is no need for blame in such a moment. You set the torn sheet aside, wipe the board, and begin the next one. Work like this teaches a person to continue without making a ceremony of every mistake. The foreman may pass by and touch the edge of a finished stack. He doesn't need to say much if the work is good. A nod can hold a whole sentence. You return to the brush, because praise and correction both pass quickly in a busy shop. The real conversation is still between your hand, the gum, and the paper. That conversation lasts longer than any words spoken over your shoulder. By the time the order slips are checked and the bundles squared, the shop's attention turns toward what can still be finished before the day's last hour slips away. The last hour is different from the first, though the motions may look the same. In the morning, the day opened ahead of you like a clean stack. Now it narrows toward washing, covering, counting, and leaving things ready for tomorrow. You still gum sheets, but you are also listening for endings. A cart taken away, a drawer closed, a press slowing, a broom beginning its rough hush along the floor. For a 1920s Cincinnati Label Gummer, the end of the day is not merely stopping. Paste must be protected, brushes cleaned, racks checked, and damp sheets placed where air can reach them overnight. If you neglect the final small tasks, tomorrow begins with hardened bristles, curled stock, or gum with a skin thick as old paint. So the last hour asks for care, even when the body would rather be done. You rinse a brush in a basin, pressing the bristles gently against the bottom. Clouds of adhesive drift into the water. They move like milk in tea, pale and slow, then fade. You change the angle of the brush and rinse again, until the bristles separate under your thumb. The water is lukewarm now, with a faint sour sweetness. It touches the tender places near your nails and finds every little crack in the skin. There is a comfort in cleaning a tool you have used all day. The brush becomes itself again, not just an extension of fatigue. You lay it flat to dry, careful not to bend the bristles. You wipe the handle, scraping away old gum with your thumbnail where it has gathered near the ferrule. The wood emerges smoother beneath the sticky ridge. It has been held by many hands, and tonight, for a while, it was held by yours. The paste pot gets its own attention. You scrape the sides with the paddle, folding the thicker gum back into the center if it can be saved. If the batch has gone dull or gritty, you know it may not be worth keeping. A shop learns economy, but economy is not the same as foolish saving. Bad gum can ruin good paper. You cover what is useful, set aside what isn't, and leave the pot where morning can find it. The bench is wiped with a damp cloth. This sounds simple, but dried gum resists in little patches. You rub in circles, feeling the cloth catch, then slide. The table changes under your palm from tacky to clean, or clean enough for tomorrow's first sheet. Old stains remain. They belong to the bench now. You don't need to remove history, only the day's fresh stickiness. We can feel the room becoming more spacious as work is put away. A table cleared of stacks seems larger than before. Racks with finished sheets look orderly rather than crowded. The floor, swept of paper scraps, shows its boards again. The smell changes too, from active paste and damp stock to cooling wood, old ink, and the faint mineral scent of wash water. Evening enters by degrees. Some sheets must remain on the racks overnight. You check that they aren't touching. You make sure no corner has folded under itself. You shift one sheet away from a draft that might dry it unevenly. Your tiredness does not make these gestures careless. In fact, it may make them slower and gentler. The day has taught your hands to move without waste, and now they move with a kind of mercy toward paper and tool alike. A worker from another table may ask whether you are finished with a rag or a bit of twine. You answer softly, or hand it over without much speech. At this hour, the room doesn't need many words. Everyone is counting inwardly, measuring what remains against the light, the clock, and the ache in the feet. The shared quiet is not unfriendly. It is the quiet of people who have spent their strength in the same place. The city outside has begun its evening change. Factory whistles call across neighborhoods. Streetcars carry clerks, shop girls, machinists, printers, packers, and errand boys toward home. The smell of supper smoke rises from houses on the hills and flats. Cincinnati is still working in many rooms, but it is also releasing people in waves. You hear only pieces of that larger motion through glass and brick, and they arrive softened, like sounds heard through cloth. If you look down at your hands, they may seem older than they did this morning. Gum dries the skin. Paper edges leave fine lines. Water softens and then tightens the fingers. You rub your thumb over your palm and feel a faint roughness where the brush handle rested. These are not wounds in any grand sense. They are small records, the day writing itself lightly on the body. And when the benches are nearly clear, the last inspection carries you back through the whole day, not in memory, but in touch. You move from rack to rack, stack to stack, bundle to bundle. The finished parcels sit squared under their twine, with order slips, tucked or marked where they belong. The damp sheets wait apart. The doubtful sheets rest in a small pile for morning judgment. Nothing here is dramatic, but each thing has its place, and that is how a working room rests. It rests by being left understandable. A 1920s Cincinnati label Gummer may not sign the work. Your name will not appear on the front, among the bright letters and little pictures made to catch a buyer's eye. Yet your presence is hidden in the way a corner stays down, in the smoothness of a label on glass, in the absence of wrinkles on a box. Many jobs are like this. They leave no signature, only fewer troubles for someone else. You take the order book, if it is part of your duty, and note what has been gummed, dried, bundled, or carried forward. The pencil feels dry after a day of paste and water. Its point scratches lightly on paper, making marks that are simpler than the work they stand for. Finished. Part dried. Hold until morning. More gum needed. These ordinary phrases keep the shop's memory from depending on tired heads alone. The act of writing changes the pace of your breathing. After the broad movement of brushing, a pencil asks for smaller muscles. You lean closer, smell the graphite, the paper, and the faint dust on the page. A lamp may be lit if the daylight has gone too low. Its yellow circle rests on the book, the bench, and your wrist. Around it, the room dims by comparison, as if the day has gathered into one small place. We can linger there, because the small pool of lamplight belongs to the working evening. It falls on twine fibers, pasted labels, a water ring, the dented paste cover, and the worn edge of the table. It makes humble things visible. It doesn't flatter them or turn them into something else. It simply shows them, and sometimes that is the gentlest kind of attention. Someone closes a window. The sound is a wooden slide, then a dull latch. The air stops moving so freely, and the remaining smells settle closer. Paste, paper, damp rag, coal smoke, ink, and the wool of coats all share the room. You untie your apron, and the front of it holds faint, stiff places, pale smudges, and a darker mark where the bench pressed all day. You fold it, not perfectly, but neatly enough. Before leaving the bench, you may run your hand once along the table edge. It is a habit, perhaps, or only the body making sure the day is truly done there. The wood feels cool now where it was warm under your work. In the tiny scratches, old gum has left a smoothness. You have spent hours at this edge, and the edge has received them without comment. The foreman may lock away certain stocks or check the bundles for delivery. A cart could come in the morning to carry them across town. Maybe they'll go to a bottling house near the river, a food packer in a brick building, or a small firm with a narrow storefront and a warehouse behind it. You don't need to know. Part of the calm is letting the work go once it has passed beyond your hands. You wash up as well as the facilities allow. The basin water may already be grey. The soap is hard, plain, and a little harsh, but it lifts the paste if you give it time. You rub between your fingers, around the nails, across the heel of the palm. Gum softens slowly. It rolls into little threads under the soap, then slips away. Your skin feels tender in the cooling air. A towel hangs nearby, rough from many washings. You press it around each finger, drying carefully because damp hands in evening air can chill quickly. The towel smells of laundry, wood smoke, and the shared use of the shop. You put on your coat, and the lining feels cool at first against your arms. The body notices the change from work warmth to outside weather. It prepares to step from one world into another. The room behind you has not vanished. It remains arranged for morning, with racks, pots, tables, brushes, and stacks all waiting in their assigned stillness. A print shop after hours has a listening quality. Without the machines, the little sounds become clear. A drip in a basin, a board settling, paper shifting faintly as it dries. The place seems to continue its work in sleep, and as you leave the gumming room, the story of the labels continues without you into the quieter machinery of drying, delivery, and use. The hallway outside the workroom is cooler. It smells less of paste and more of brick dust, coal heat, and old wood. Your footsteps sound different here, firmer and more hollow because the floor is not cushioned by paper stacks and benches. A door stands open into the press room. and you see the machines resting in their heavy shapes, black with oil and use. They look almost solemn when still. You pass the paper storage area, where reams and cartons sit in square shadows. Paper before printing has a dry, clean smell, like a cupboard kept shut. It waits in bulk, blank and quiet, full of possible labels, bills, wrappers, letterheads, and notices. Earlier in the day, it may have seemed like supply. Now, in the late light, it seems like sleep. We don't disturb it, we only pass by. Near the delivery area, finished bundles are gathered by customer and route. Your wrapped labels might be among them, though they look different now, less like work and more like cargo. Brown paper, twine, pencil marks, squared corners. A hand truck stands near the door, its metal edge scuffed bright where shoes and boxes have struck it. Tomorrow, someone will tilt the load back, wheels squeaking, and guide it toward a waiting truck or wagon. Cincinnati's streets in the 1920s are full of such parcels. They move from print shops to factories, from factories to wholesalers, from wholesalers to stores, and from stores into cupboards and kitchens. Labels are small, but they travel widely. They cling to jam jars, lard tins, medicine bottles, seed packets, shoe polish cans, and boxes of biscuits. Your gum goes with them, silent and dry until water wakes it. It is strange to think of your day scattered across the city in fragments. A label you gummed might sit behind a grocer's counter on Race Street. Another might go into a storeroom near the river, where the floor smells of damp boards and produce crates. Another might cross the bridge into Kentucky, wrapped around a jar in a market window. The work leaves you and becomes ordinary everywhere else. We can stay with that thought gently. So much of a city is held together by work nobody pauses to name. Someone sharpens knives, boils paste, sweeps platforms, checks weights, trims wicks, oils bearings, and counts tickets. Someone gums labels at a wooden bench until the stack is ready. The city depends on these small acts without ever turning toward them fully. There is peace in noticing them now. Outside, evening light sits between buildings. The brick walls hold warmth from the day, while the air near the ground cools. You may pull your coat closer as you step out, because paste rooms can make the outside feel sharper. The smell of the street arrives all at once: coal smoke, damp stone, horse traces, gasoline, bread from a bakery, and the faint river scent that belongs to Cincinnati, whether one mentions it or not. Your hands are clean, but not entirely free of the work. If you lift them near your face, there may still be a trace of starch paste under the soap, a mild, almost edible smell. Your cuffs may be stiff. A spot on your sleeve may catch the light. These things are modest, and they will fade. But for now they accompany you like the day's quiet echo. A streetcar approaches with a hum through the rails before its bell rings. People gather along the curb, each carrying the marks of a different occupation. You notice lunch pails, inked fingers, tired hats, polished shoes from office work, and rougher shoes from shops and yards. Everyone is leaving some bench, desk, counter, or machine behind. Everyone is carrying a little of it home. If you board the car, the interior is warm with wool coats and human breath. The wooden seat is smooth and hard under you. The windows rattle slightly as the car moves. You hold the strap or rest your hands in your lap, and for a moment they feel empty without the brush. That emptiness is pleasant. It lets the fingers remember their own shape after a day of holding tools. The city slides by in pieces. Store windows, lampposts, a bakery door, a man sweeping a step, a child pointing at something in a window, a grocer arranging tins whose labels may have passed through hands like yours. You see the fronts now, not the backs, bright lettering and neat borders facing the street. Nobody looking at them thinks of dried gum. You do, and the thought is quietly satisfying. As the streetcar carries you through the evening, the label room remains behind, cooling into stillness while the finished work begins its small journey outward. In the morning, those finished bundles will be lifted, checked, and carried. The twine will bite slightly into brown paper as someone takes hold. A delivery man may stack them with other parcels, making sure they don't bend under heavier boxes. The truck bed will smell of wood, oil, dust, and old rope. Your labels will travel through streets still damp from night air, over cobbles, rails, and patched roadways. We can follow them softly, because following the work helps us understand yours. The bundles might arrive at a bottling room where workers dampen the gummed backs on sponges and smooth them onto glass. The room may smell of syrup, wash water, metal caps and crates. Or they might go to a cannery, where tins pass in steady rows and labels are wrapped by hand or simple machine. In each place, the dry gum becomes useful again. When the back of a label is moistened, it changes almost instantly. The dry surface darkens, the gum softens. The paper becomes more flexible, more willing to take the shape of the thing beneath it. Someone presses the label down with the palm, a pad, or a cloth, smoothing from the center outward. If you did your work well, the corners obey. They settle and hold. This later worker may never know you existed, but your care makes their rhythm easier. A well-gummed label saves them from extra rubbing, wasted sheets, lifted edges, and the small annoyance of stopping the line. Good work often appears as the absence of trouble. That is worth remembering. In quiet trades, skill can hide itself so completely that only failure would have made it visible. The label then moves farther along, attached now to a real thing. A jar of preserves cools on a shelf. A tin of polish waits in a crate. A carton of soap flakes is packed with others. The printed face gives the product its name, but the gum holds that name in place. You worked on the unseen side, and still the visible side depends on you. There is a gentle balance in that. In the 1920s, packages are becoming more familiar, more colorful, more trusted by shoppers who may not know the maker personally. A label says consistency. It says this jar belongs with the last jar, and the next. It says a product has a home, a name, and a promise that can be recognized again. Your brush is part of that changing world, though your bench remains plain and close to the floorboards. You don't need to think of commerce in grand terms. It is enough to picture a shelf in a corner grocery, dust motes in window light, and rows of labeled jars with their paper faces turned outward. A clerk reaches for one, wraps it, and hands it across the counter. Somewhere in that simple exchange, the gum you spread has done its small, steady duty. It has held on. But our place remains with you, and with the room where such holding begins. The next morning, you may return before the air has warmed. The benches will be waiting. The racks will hold sheets left from yesterday, now dry and slightly curled in the cool room. You'll test them by touch, straighten what needs straightening, and prepare the first gum of the day. The cycle begins by receiving what the previous evening left behind. There is comfort in a job that remembers yesterday, not all at once and not sentimentally, but through objects. A covered paste pot, a stack marked for morning, a brush laid flat, a note in pencil. These things greet you more honestly than speeches. They tell you what was done and what remains. You step back into the same stream, and the stream knows your place. As another workday forms around the bench, the Cincinnati Label Gummer's world becomes less about a single shift and more about a craft repeated until the hands can find it in any light. A craft does not always announce itself with fine tools or expensive materials. Sometimes it lives in cheap paper, warm paste, and a brush worn soft at the edges. It lives in knowing how long to wait before stacking, how much pressure a damp sheet can bear, and when a batch of gum has lost its clean flow. You learn these things by doing them many times. The learning sinks below words. If a new worker stands beside you, you may show rather than explain. You lay a sheet face down, square it, dip the brush, tap the rim, and draw the gum across in one slow pass. Then you pause and let the new worker see the shine. Not glossy puddles, not dry streaks, but an even dampness that dulls as it settles. You might say, like that. And the lesson is mostly in the motion. The new worker's first sheets may curl, blotch, or stick. That is expected. Paper is unforgiving in small ways, but it is also generous because there is always another sheet. You watch without scolding. You remember your own first days, when the brush seemed too wide, the paste too changeable, and the racks too narrow for nervous hands. The work becomes kinder once you know it can be learned. A shop passes knowledge sideways. One worker shows how to thin paste without making it weak. Another shows how to lift a damp sheet by 2 corners so it doesn't sag. Someone else knows which window draft will curl thin stock by afternoon. These bits of wisdom gather in the room like dust, unnoticed until needed. We can feel them around you, soft and practical, as real as the smell of ink. Your own hands have preferences now. You like a certain brush because its handle fits the hollow of your palm. You prefer one corner of the bench because the light falls evenly there. You know which drying rack has a loose slat and which table leg needs a folded scrap under it. These details make the workspace yours, not by ownership, but by familiarity. You belong through use. There may be women working at nearby tables, depending on the shop and the order, because fine repetitive paperwork often passed through women's hands in factories and print rooms. There may be men from the press room, cutters, wrappers, and errand boys moving around the edges. The shop is a mixture of tasks and wages, habits and hierarchies, but at the bench, the sheet still needs the same even coat. The material keeps everyone honest in its quiet way. The clothes of the workday are ordinary, sleeves rolled, aprons tied, hair pinned or tucked back, shoes chosen for standing rather than show. In winter, a sweater may be kept on until the room warms. In summer, windows open and paste dries faster than anyone would like. You learn to dress for paper, weather, and the length of hours. Comfort is not luxury here, it is a tool. The city's seasons enter the gumming room through humidity. On a wet spring morning, paper may feel limp before the brush touches it. In July, the air can grow heavy enough that dried sheets need more time before stacking. In cold weather, paste thickens if the room is poorly heated, and your fingers may stiffen until the first hour passes. A label, Gummer's calendar, is written partly in the behavior of paper. We can imagine rain tapping at the windows while you work. The room dims, lamps are lit earlier, and the smell of wet coats joins the paste. Sheets dry more slowly, and everyone becomes a little more careful about stacking. Outside, Cincinnati's gutters run dark along the curb, and wagon wheels or tires hiss through puddles. Inside, your brush moves with slightly lighter pressure because the air is already doing part of the wetting. On a dry, cold day, the opposite happens. Paper crackles faintly, your skin roughens. Paste cools at the edges of the pot, and you keep it closer to warmth if you can. The brush strokes sound sharper. The sheets may lie flatter, but the gum can set too quickly if neglected. Each weather has its own bargain. You learn the terms by living them, and we learn them beside you, one slow sheet at a time. As the seasons pass over the shop roof, the same bench holds different kinds of days, and the label Gummer's routine becomes a quiet measure of the city's weather. There are mornings when the fog from the river makes the windows pale and uncertain. The buildings across the way seem farther off than they are. Light spreads through the room without clear edges, and the printed colors on the labels appear softer when you glimpse them. Your hands begin cold, but the paste pot gives off a faint warmth. The first dip of the brush feels almost comforting. On such a morning, the shop sounds are muffled. Even the press seems wrapped in wool. Voices travel less sharply. The floorboards absorb footsteps. You may find yourself working a little slower, not because anyone told you to, but because the whole city has softened. The gum spreads well if it has been mixed properly, and the damp air keeps the sheets pliable. You watch the racks more closely, giving them time. Then there are bright mornings when sun strikes the table and shows every speck of dust. You shift the stack away from direct light, so the gum doesn't dry unevenly. The brush glints at the wet edge. Paperbacks look almost luminous before they dull. In that sharper light, mistakes appear quickly. A missed stripe, a thick corner, a fleck caught under paste. The sun can be a stern inspector, though it warms your hands. Summer brings its own thick room. The air feels close under the ceiling. Paste smells stronger. Ink smells heavier. A fly may circle the damp edge of a basin until someone waves it off with a rag. Your collar sticks at the back of your neck, and the brush handle grows slippery if you forget to wipe it. Still, the work continues and you adjust. You dip less deeply, you spread faster, you give sheets air without letting dust settle on them. In winter, the first hour may belong to thawing. The stove or radiators clank and breathe. Coats hang near the door, giving off the smell of wool, snow, and street soot. Your fingers feel clumsy until the blood returns fully to them. The paste may need warming, and the paper may resist with a dry curl at the edges. You press the first sheet flat with both hands, waiting a breath longer before drawing the brush across. There is no season in which the label does not need its back prepared. Goods are packed all year. People buy soap, polish, food, medicine, and household supplies in every weather. The shelves must be filled, the boxes named, the jars marked. So the gumming room follows the year without stopping for poetry, though poetry slips in anyway, in the steam above a paste pot or the blue winter light on a drying rack. You might notice holidays only through the labels themselves, a run of special wrappers before Christmas, preserves and spices moving before cold weather, bright summer drink labels appearing when the days lengthen. The work hints at households you never enter, meals you never share, shelves you never stock. Your bench receives those hints and turns them into finished bundles, ready to pass along. The labels can be beautiful in their modest way. Some use strong block letters, meant to be read quickly. Some have borders of vines, ribbons, shields, wheat, fruit, or clean geometric lines that became fashionable in the decade. Some still carry older flourishes, little curls and shaded letters from another taste. You see these fronts only briefly, but enough to know the shop's visual world is wider than the plain backs before you. Yet your eyes often prefer the back. The back tells the truth of the material. It shows fiber, cut, curl, dampness, and absorption. It doesn't perform for customers. It simply receives the gum. After hours at the bench, you may find the back of a label more interesting than the face, because it tells you what you need to know. That is one of the quiet transformations of work. Attention rearranges beauty, and as the weather changes beyond the windows, the room keeps returning you to the same ordinary test of hand, paper, paste, and time. Time in a gumming room is not only the clock on the wall, it is the drying time of a sheet, the cooling time of paste, the time before a stack can be wrapped, the time a worker can stand before shifting weight from one foot to the other. You live inside several kinds of time at once, and each one has its own small authority. The clock may say hurry, but damp paper says wait. You learn not to argue with damp paper. If it needs more air, it needs more air. Pressing it too soon only stores trouble for later. This is a useful lesson, though the room teaches it without making speeches. Some things cannot be hurried without changing what they become. A label must dry into readiness. A hand must learn into steadiness. A day must pass through its tasks in order. The racks are the shop's quiet hourglass. In the morning, they stand empty. Then they fill, one sheet at a time, until their slats or screens hold the work in pale layers. Later, they empty again into stacks and bundles. You can read the day by their fullness. Half full means the rhythm is established. Crowded means the air must do its part. Empty at evening means the room has released what it can. Sometimes a rush order arrives and disturbs the ordinary pace. Even then, the material allows only so much haste. You can spread gum a little faster, carry sheets a little more briskly, clear a rack with sharper attention. But you cannot command wet paper to be dry. You cannot make poor gum good by wishing. The shop may be busy, but the process remains calmly stubborn, and your hands must honor that. That stubbornness may be one reason the work feels soothing to remember. It belongs to a world in which physical things set limits. Paste thickens, paper curls, twine frays, a brush wears down, the body tires. None of this is failure. It is the texture of the real, and you meet it with motions learned over many days. There is peace in limits when you stop fighting them. We stay close to the bench because the bench is where those limits become manageable. A whole order may seem large in the ledger, but on the table it becomes one sheet beneath your hands, then another, then another. The mind doesn't need to hold the entire number at once. It only needs to keep the coat even, the corners clean, and the next rack ready. Large tasks become bearable when they pass through small gestures. Your breathing finds that pattern too. You inhale as you place the sheet. You exhale as the brush travels. You pause as you lift. You step to the rack. The body makes a metronome of itself. This is not something you plan. It happens because repetition invites the breath to settle, and once settled, the breath makes the work feel less separate from you. There may be a radio in some later shops, but in many rooms of the earlier 1920s, music is more likely to be whistled, hummed, or carried in from the street. A tune may pass through the room and disappear. You may catch 2 lines of it, then lose it to the press. The brush continues anyway. The work does not need entertainment, though it welcomes small human sounds. A half-heard conversation can become part of the rhythm. Someone mentions a rent increase, a baseball score, a cousin's wedding, a new motor car seen downtown, or the price of coal. The words drift over your bench and settle nowhere. You listen without leaving the sheet. Much of working life is like this, shared in fragments while the hands keep their own obligations. The talk passes. The gum remains. By midweek, the shop may feel different from Monday. People know the shape of the orders. They know which jobs are behind and which are moving cleanly. The room has a mood, not dramatic, but real. On some days it is brisk, on others, tired. On payday, perhaps a little lighter. You feel these shifts in voices, steps, and the way people stand near the stove or doorway. The bench receives every mood and asks for the same care. As the week gathers its own rhythm, your place in the shop becomes less a station you occupy, and more a path your hands know how to walk. A path can be measured in inches, from stack to board, from pot to sheet, from table to rack, from rack to wrapping paper. You travel this small territory again and again until it becomes as familiar as a street near home. If someone moved the paste pot, your hand would reach for the old place before your eyes corrected it. That is how deeply a workspace enters the body. The table's height matters. Too low and your back complains. Too high and your shoulders rise until they ache. If the bench suits you, the day is easier in ways outsiders may not notice. You may place a thin board under a stack to bring it closer, or stand on a mat if the floor is hard. Small adjustments save strength across hours. Workers understand this arithmetic of comfort very well. The drying racks have their own demands. Some slide, some swing, some are fixed shelves with spaces for air. You learn how to load them so the sheets don't brush against one another. You learn which ones take heavy stock and which ones are better for smaller labels. The rack is not just furniture, it is part of the process, a patient holder of half-finished work. If the shop uses a hand gumming machine for certain orders, your work changes but doesn't vanish. A roller may carry gum onto the backs of sheets, and a crank or feed board may help keep the coat even. The machine has its own rhythm, a soft turning and wet contact, quicker than the brush but still dependent on judgment. You watch the gum level, the roller pressure, and the way sheets emerge. Mechanism helps, but it does not replace attention. Some shops adopt machines slowly because machines require maintenance, money, and orders large enough to justify them. Hand gumming remains useful for smaller runs, special stock, repairs, and work that needs a sensitive touch. In 1920s Cincinnati, old and new methods can share the same room. A motor truck may wait outside, while a worker inside ties bundles with twine and judges paste by finger feel. The decade is modern, but not evenly so. That mixture gives the room its atmosphere. Electric lights may hang above old wooden benches. A telephone may ring near ledgers written by hand. A powered press may print labels that someone still carries to a rack by arm. You stand among these overlapping times, not as an observer, but as a worker whose own motions connect them. Your brush belongs to an older craft, while the labels it prepares may ride through a newer city. We can let that thought pass softly, because your day is not about progress as a slogan. It is about getting the batch right. Whatever the decade claims for itself, the label still needs gum, the paper still needs drying, the bundle still needs to arrive flat. History often enters quietly that way, not as a speech, but as a change in tools, lights, streets, and the pace at which orders come in. If a machine is used nearby, it may make a gentle sucking sound as sheets pass over the gum roller. The operator watches for skewed paper, just as you watch for missed corners. When the machine works well, it is satisfying, almost hypnotic. When it misbehaves, it can waste stock quickly. So even there, calm vigilance matters. The machine has speed, but your eyes have judgment. At your hand bench, the pace is slower and more intimate. Each sheet receives a direct touch. The brush marks vanish as the gum levels out, but for a moment, you can see the path your hand took. Long strokes, slight overlaps, a careful finish at the edge. The sheet carries the brief map of your motion, then absorbs it. That vanishing is part of the quiet beauty of the task. And when tools, benches, racks, and machines have all found their place around you, the work becomes a small world with weather, customs, memory, and measure. The people who buy the finished goods will almost never think about label gum. They will notice the picture, the brand, the price, perhaps the neatness of the package on a shelf. If a label peels, they may notice that. If it holds, they think of something else entirely. This is normal. Holding is supposed to be invisible. You are making invisibility reliable, and that is a patient trade. A jar label in a kitchen faces steam, damp hands, cupboard dust, and the occasional drip from a sink. A tin label in a store faces handling, stacking, and the rub of other tins. A carton label may travel in a crate, in a wagon, in a storeroom, and onto a shelf before anyone carries it home. The gum must endure the ordinary roughness of ordinary life. You prepare it for that without drama. The paste recipe matters, but so does the way it is applied. Too much gum may seem strong, but it can cause trouble. The paper swells, dries unevenly, and wrinkles. Too little gum saves material at first, then fails later. The right coat is modest. It is present enough to work and restrained enough to behave. There is a lesson there too, though the brush teaches it more plainly than words. You might think of other things while your hand continues. A bill due at home, a letter waiting to be written, the sound of rain on a roof, the taste of lunch, the face of someone you'll see after work. The job allows small thoughts to pass through because the body holds the pattern. It doesn't demand every corner of the mind, but it punishes total neglect. So you drift, then return, drift, then return. That returning is gentle. The paper calls you back with a lifted edge or a dry sound from the brush. The paste calls you back by thickening. The rack calls you back by filling. Nothing shouts. The work reminds you in its own language, and over time you become fluent enough to hear it before trouble grows large. This is one of the comforts of craft. Attention can become quiet instead of tense. We can imagine a long afternoon when rain keeps tapping the window, and the whole room seems to breathe in damp paper. You work beside the grey light, adding slightly less gum, leaving more air between sheets, checking corners with a fingertip. Outside, Cincinnati moves under umbrellas, hats, and wet streetcar steps. Inside, you keep a dry order inside a damp day, one sheet at a time. Or we can imagine a bright, dusty afternoon in late summer when the paste skins quickly and the brush needs more frequent rinsing. The sun makes the printed colors flare whenever a sheet turns. Your sleeves stick, the water basin warms, and paper cuttings cling to damp spots on the floor. Still, the labels line up. Still, the bundles gather. The work makes a steady lane through heat. The body learns to endure not by force, but by pacing. You shift your stance before pain sharpens. You rest one hand while the other squares a stack. You look up from the table to soften your eyes. You take a drink of water when the gum smell grows too close. These are small mercies workers give themselves, often without naming them. They keep the day human. If someone asks what you do, you might say simply that you gum labels. The phrase is plain enough that a person may nod and move on. But inside, it is a whole room, a whole set of motions, a knowledge of paper and paste, a city's packages, waiting for names that will stay attached. Plain phrases often hold more than they appear to hold. Tonight, we are letting this one open slowly. As the afternoon of memory lengthens, the simple phrase label Gummer becomes a doorway into all the small, exact labors that let ordinary things be recognized. Recognition matters in a shop window. A shopper sees a familiar label and trusts the contents before touching the jar. A grocer finds the right item because the face of the package speaks quickly from a crowded shelf. A delivery clerk sorts crates by printed names. A household cupboard becomes more orderly because each package carries its identity on the outside. Your work sits beneath that visible order like a quiet hinge. In the 1920s, printed packaging grows brighter and more deliberate. Companies want their goods to be remembered. They use color, shape, slogans, and little pictures of farms, kitchens, factories, medals, or smiling figures. Yet all those printed promises still depend on material behavior. Ink must dry, paper must be cut, gum must hold. The visible world rests on hidden processes, and you are one of the hidden hands. A label sheet before cutting can be a beautiful grid. The same picture repeats in rows, each one separated by margins that will later disappear under the blade. When you turn such a sheet face down, the repeated images become secret. You work on the plain back, knowing the front has rhythm too, though hidden. Later, the cutter will divide the sheet, and the many small labels will go their separate ways. The cutter's work has its own music. A stack is jogged square, slid into place, measured, and held. The blade descends with a heavy, clean sound, and the trimmed edge falls away. If you are nearby, you feel the action in the floor. Cut paper smells sharper than uncut paper, fresh at the edge, almost like split wood in miniature. Your gummed sheets must be dry and flat enough to meet that blade cleanly. Sometimes labels are cut before gumming, especially depending on size, process, and shop habit. Then you handle smaller stacks, and the work becomes more delicate. Individual labels can shift, cling, or scatter if the gum catches where it shouldn't. You may use a smaller brush, a guide, or a board with stops to keep them aligned. The motion tightens, the breathing grows finer. Care becomes a narrower path. For larger sheets, the broad brush strokes are calmer. You can feel the whole field of paper under your hand. The sheet lies like a pale cloth across the board. The gum shines in long bands. You overlap each stroke slightly, keeping the coat continuous. If the brush leaves ridges, you smooth them before they set. The work looks simple from across the room, and exact from inside your own wrist. We stay inside the wrist for a moment. It turns, lifts, lowers, draws, and pauses. The muscles near the thumb guide pressure. The fingers hold without clenching. The forearm carries the motion farther than the hand alone could. When the work goes well, the whole arm participates, and strain is shared. When you grip too tightly, fatigue arrives sooner. The body teaches economy through tiredness. A good worker learns to keep the brush alive, but not frantic. The stroke must be continuous, yet unforced. The gum must spread before soaking unevenly. You keep the sheet from shifting with a light touch from the other hand, careful not to leave marks where the paper is damp. Everything is coordinated, but quietly so. No one watching casually would see how much is happening. There are days when the paste has tiny lumps, and those must be strained or worked out before they scar the coat. A lump under a label can become a bubble later. You may feel it through the brush before you see it. That small resistance sends a message up the handle. You stop, lift it away, wipe the spot, and continue. The hand becomes a listener, and the brush becomes the line of communication. There are days when the printed ink on the face has dried poorly, and stacking too soon could offset the image onto another sheet. The gummer must coordinate with the press room, because the back cannot be treated as separate from the front. Paper is thin, moisture moves, pressure transfers. The object is one thing, even when different workers handle different sides. This is a useful truth in any shared labor. If ink smell is strong, you know the job is fresh from press. Reds, blues, blacks and yellows each bring their own faint character, mixed with oil and solvent and the mineral smell of pigment. You may not know the chemistry by name, but your nose knows freshness. Your fingertips know whether the sheet is safe to handle. Your caution protects the printed face while you prepare the hidden back. As the printed face and gummed back come together in one finished label, the shop's separate trades meet in a single thin piece of paper that will travel farther than any one worker's bench. This meeting of trades gives the print shop its layered feeling. The composing room has the dry metallic click of type and the careful tension of lines locked into a form. The press room has motion, ink, rollers, and the steady appetite of machinery. The cutting area has measurement and decisive edges. The gumming bench has moisture, patience, and drying time. Each space has its smell and sound. Each one sends work onward. You may hear the typesetters before you see them. Small metal pieces touched, sorted, and returned. Though your labels may use engraved plates, lithographic stones, or prepared forms depending on the shop, the world of printing still carries the discipline of arranging marks. Letters must sit correctly. Borders must align. A label that looks effortless may have passed through many corrections before reaching paper. You receive it after much visible thought has already been made. At your bench, thought becomes tactile. The design is fixed, but the material future is still open. Will it curl? Will it stick? Will it dry smooth? Will it stack cleanly? These questions are answered by process, not argument. You answer them with paste thickness, brush pressure, airspace, and time. It is a different kind of intelligence, quieter than design, but no less real. The people in the shop may recognize one another by task as much as by name. The cutter, the feeder, the pressman, the girl at the wrapping table, the boy from deliveries, the label gummer. These names reduce people, of course, but they also reveal the room's order. Each person is known by a kneaded motion. Your kneaded motion is the even spreading of adhesion, the making ready of paper to hold. Sometimes someone brings you a problem. A customer complained that labels lifted on damp bottles. A batch curled badly after drying. A certain stock resisted the gum. The question comes to your bench because the answer may be in the paste, the paper, the weather, or the hand. You test a scrap, change the mix, lighten the stroke, and see what happens. Troubleshooting, in a quiet job, often looks like patience applied more closely. You may keep scraps for testing. A strip of the same paper, a dab of fresh gum, a weight near the rack, then a touch of water later to see how it wakes. These little trials don't feel like formal experiments, but they are. Workers have always tested materials this way, with scraps, senses, and common sense sharpened by repetition. The shop's knowledge grows in such humble forms. A label meant for a cold bottle may need different handling from one meant for a dry carton. Condensation can weaken a poor bond. Rough cardboard may accept gum readily, while glass asks for smooth contact. Metal tins can be slick and curved. Wood can be dry and thirsty. Though you may never apply the labels yourself, you learn the nature of the surfaces through complaints, successes, and the practical talk that moves through the trade. We can feel how the world beyond the bench presses softly into your choices. A damp cellar, a shop shelf near a window, a delivery crate in rain, a grocer's hand, a housewife's cupboard, a child turning a jar to read the picture. All of these future moments are far away, yet the gum you spread must be ready for them. That gives the quiet task a long reach. The reach does not make the work louder. It remains a brush, a pot, a sheet, and a rack. That is why it suits the sleepy mind. The meaning can be wide. While the movement stays small, you can rest inside the small movement and let the wider meaning drift at the edges, like street sounds beyond a window. And as the shop's many trades fold into the single surface of a label, your attention returns again to the bench, where the next sheet waits face down and plain. The plainness is welcome after thinking of streets, shelves, factories, and customers. The sight of a blank paper back brings everything home to touch. You lay your left hand near the top edge, not pressing hard, only steadying. With your right hand, you draw the brush from left to right, then back again in a second pass. The gum catches the light for a moment, then it begins to dull. You lift the sheet. The paper sags slightly, but not too much. You carry it to the rack with both hands, feeling the tiny pull of damp fibers. When you lay it down, one corner tries to curl. You coax it flat with a fingertip. That fingertip leaves no mark because you have learned how much pressure paper will accept. A small success, and then you return. This return is the heart of the work. Not the first sheet, not the last, but the coming back again after each completed motion. The bench receives you, the stack waits. The pot gives up another brushful, the rack opens another space. A day is built of returns, and because each return is familiar, the mind can grow quiet without losing its place. In sleep too, there is a kind of return. Breath returns, the body returns to the mattress. Thoughts wander and return to the dark behind the eyes. Perhaps that is why a job like this can calm a listener. It offers repetition without emptiness, detail without alarm, and a world where every object asks only for the next gentle handling. We stay there together, and nothing sudden is required. The label backs continue beneath your hand. Some are ivory, some gray-white, some show tiny flecks in the paper, some are smooth enough that the brush glides almost silently. Others have a tooth that makes a faint rasp. The differences are small, but your senses have slowed enough to receive them. You don't need spectacle when texture has become this clear. If a sheet has been cut slightly out of square, you notice when it refuses to align with the stack. You turn it, check the edge, and decide whether it belongs with the main order or the rework pile. The decision is practical and quick, but it rests on a trained eye. A crooked stack causes trouble later. Better to catch the issue while the paper is still under your care. You may sometimes feel a small pride when a difficult batch comes out clean. Not boastful pride, not the kind that needs an audience, but a private easing in the chest. The sheets dried flat, the gum held evenly, the bundles squared well, the foreman had no complaint. Such satisfaction is quiet enough to carry home without speaking of it. It is one of the wages that doesn't appear in the envelope. Of course, the pay envelope matters too. Work is not made of atmosphere alone. At the end of the week, money is counted, folded, and taken home for rent, food, coal, shoes, or savings if there is room. The calm of the bench exists inside ordinary need. That doesn't make the work less worthy. It makes the small competence of it more human, because care is given even when life is practical. We keep the warmth honest that way. The room is not a dream room. It has sore feet, strict hours, imperfect air, and wages that must stretch. It also has jokes, habits, skill, daylight on paper, and the deep comfort of knowing what your hands are for. Warm realism holds both together. You don't need the job to be easy in order for its rhythm to soothe. As the day returns again and again to the same measured motions, the Cincinnati Label Gummer's bench becomes a place where effort and calm can sit side by side. There are moments when your mind drifts toward home while your hands keep working. You might picture a kitchen table, a lamp, a chair by a window, or a street you know well in the evening. Then a sheet edge lifts, and you return at once to the paper. The return is not harsh. It is like being called by name in a soft voice. The work needs you, and you answer. The shop's dust settles on everything by degrees. Paper dust is fine and pale. It gathers along shelf edges, in corners of racks, and near the cutter. Mixed with paste, it can form little specks that must be kept away from wet sheets. You wipe the bench more often than an outsider might expect. Cleanliness here is not decorative. It is part of adhesion, part of finish, part of pride. Your rag becomes a record of the day. One corner is stiff with old gum, another is damp and useful. A darker smear shows where it picked up ink from a careless touch. You fold it to find a clean side, then fold it again when that side is spent. Simple objects earn their place by being used intelligently. A rag, a brush, a pot, a string. None are glamorous. all unnecessary. The string dispenser, if the shop has one, may be a nail, a hook, or a weighted ball of twine kept from rolling away. Twine has a grassy, dry smell. It leaves fibers on your palm when you pull it tight. A good bundle knot is firm, but not cruel to the paper edges. You learn to tie quickly, leaving ends short enough not to snag. Even the knot has a shop style. Labels bound in twine wait with a subdued dignity. They are no longer loose sheets, vulnerable to every draft. They have become counted work. When you lift them, they have weight, not much at first, but more than paper seems like it should. A large order can surprise the arms. Paper is light only in single sheets. In bundles it becomes substantial, and the body respects it. You carry a bundle to the outgoing shelf. The shelf is marked by customer names, maybe in pencil on cards or chalk on a board. The wood under the bundles is scratched from years of parcels sliding in and out. You place the stack carefully, aligning it with the others. This placement completes one little loop of the day. The order is not gone, but it has left your immediate care. Then the bench calls again. Another stack, another order, another paste check. The repetition might sound endless when described plainly, but inside the room it is shaped by countless tiny thresholds. Starting a batch, filling a rack, testing dryness, wrapping a lot, clearing the table. Each threshold gives the mind a place to rest before continuing. The day is long, but it is not shapeless. A clock tick can be heard when the press pauses. During those brief pauses, the gumming room seems to float. Without the larger machine rhythm, your brush sounds louder, your breathing nearer, and the paper's small noises more distinct. Then the press starts again, and the old background returns. You may not have realized how much you leaned on that sound until it disappeared for a moment. The body leans on many background things. Light from a certain window. The position of a co-worker's table. The smell of paste at the correct thickness. The scrape of the cutter at familiar intervals. When these are present, the room feels in order. When one is missing, you notice. Even if you don't know why at first. Familiar labor tunes the senses to patterns. As the room's patterns repeat, they become almost like a quiet piece of music, not played for anyone, but made by the need to keep working together. The music has low notes and high notes. The low notes are machines, carts, doors, and footsteps. The high notes are paper edges, pencil scratches, glass jars clinking somewhere beyond your room, and the light tap of brush against pot. Your own part is soft and steady, a wet hush across paper, a lift, a step, a laydown. It is not a song, exactly, but it has measure. If you listen too closely, the room separates into parts. If you relax, it blends. Sleepy listening prefers the blend, when no one sound demands too much attention. The same is true of the work. Each motion matters, but the whole pattern carries you. You don't need to name every stroke. You only need to remain with it, and the work will keep showing you what comes next. The paste pot is lower now. You can see a ring along the inside where the morning level used to be. The ring has dried slightly darker, and you scrape it down before it hardens. The paddle makes a slow, sticky sound. You add a little fresh paste from a smaller jar and stir until the mixture is even again. The scent rises stronger for a moment, sweet and warm, then settles back into the room. A fresh brushful glides well. You can feel the difference at once. The stroke lengthens. The bristles spread smoothly. The sheet takes the gum without dragging. This is one of the small pleasures of the job, when material, tool, and motion briefly agree with one another. It may last only a few sheets before another adjustment is needed, but while it lasts, the work feels easy in the hands. We can rest there for a few breaths. The brush travels, the paper shines, the rack receives. Cincinnati moves beyond the walls with all its wheels, bells, voices, and smoke, but here the world is narrow and sufficient. A label gummer's task may be overlooked, yet within it there is room for attention, weather, touch, and time. That is more than enough for a slow evening's telling. The next order has smaller labels, and the printed fronts show a careful border that must not be spoiled. You check the stack for offset, Then lay the first sheet down. Smaller labels mean more edges after cutting, more chances for corners to lift if gum is uneven. You work deliberately, pulling the brush across in parallel strokes, making sure each future little rectangle receives its share. The sheet looks plain from the back, but you know it contains many small futures. Your hand slows near the margins. The gum must reach close enough to hold, but not so carelessly that it smears onto the table and catches the next sheet. You wipe the board edge more often. You keep your fingertips dry. The work becomes a little more exact, and exactness can be calming when it is not rushed. It gives the mind a narrow lane and asks it to walk there gently. A co-worker passes behind you carrying a stack of printed stock. You feel the movement of air before you hear the steps. The sheets give off that dry, fluttering smell of fresh paper and ink. You shift slightly to give room without breaking your stroke. In a shop, bodies learn to pass each other closely, with trays, bundles, pails, and tools, each person trusting the others to keep the shared space workable. There is courtesy in not jostling a wet sheet. There is courtesy in returning a borrowed knife, in closing a paste lid, in warning someone about a slick spot on the floor. These small manners rarely appear in records, but they make a workday bearable. You practice them because you live beside other people's tasks. Your calm depends partly on their care, and theirs partly on yours. The floor near the gumming area can become tacky if spills are not wiped quickly. A shoe sole lifts with a faint kiss of sound. Dust sticks there, making a grey patch that grows unless someone deals with it. You notice and wipe it when you can, because a dropped sheet would pick up every speck. Again, the job teaches that small neglects are easier to prevent than repair. As the small label order fills the rack, the room turns toward a quieter concentration, the sort that comes when tired hands are asked to become precise, rather than fast. Precision late in the day has a special feeling. It asks for gentleness, because force is no longer fresh. You let the brush do more of the work. You keep your shoulders low. You bring the sheet toward you rather than reaching too far. The body has learned where strain hides, and you avoid those places with the wisdom of repetition. It is not laziness, it is preservation. The small labels will perhaps go onto little tins of ointment, packets of spice, or boxes of tablets from a Cincinnati concern with a name printed in confident letters. The products themselves may be ordinary, sitting behind counters or in cupboards, but their labels must look neat. A crooked or peeling label makes even a good product seem careless. Your invisible coat of gum helps protect that first impression. You may think of the customers only vaguely. The real customer at your bench is the sheet itself. It needs even moisture, clean handling, and enough air. This narrow loyalty is how large systems function without overwhelming the worker. You do your part for the object in front of you. Someone else does theirs later. Trust passes along the chain in the form of well-prepared materials. The brush handle has warmed again in your palm. It fits now as if shaped for you, though really you have shaped yourself around it. A new brush can feel strange, almost too sharp in the bristles, too clean in the handle. An old brush carries use. It has softened, learned, and darkened. Tools age with workers, and workers sometimes prefer a tool after it has lost its first stiffness. If the bristles splay too much, the brush becomes unreliable near edges. Then it may be trimmed, reassigned to rougher work, or replaced. There is a small sadness in giving up a familiar tool, but no drama. A worn brush has done its share. You set it aside with the practical affection people have for things that served them well. Another brush will learn your hand in time. The paste has a sheen that can be read almost like water in a shallow pan. If it shines too glassy, it may be too wet. If it drags dull, it may be too thick. Your judgment is not perfect, but it is practiced. You adjust before a problem becomes visible in the whole batch. This is the difference between reacting and tending. Tending is quieter. It stays ahead by staying close. We are tending with you now, watching the small signs. A corner, a streak, a sound, a smell, a change in weight at the brush tip. The job becomes a set of gentle questions asked over and over, and each answer is given by touch. There is no need to hurry the questions. The paper will answer when your hand is listening. The late light thins, and a lamp is turned on. Its glow changes the color of the gum slightly, making the wet areas warmer and the dry paper more yellow. Shadows lengthen under the racks. The outside windows turn reflective, showing faint shapes of the room instead of the city beyond. You can see a dim version of yourself there, bent over the table, moving with patient regularity. That reflection is not something you study. It appears and disappears as you work. Yet it reminds us that the labor has a shape, a silhouette. Shoulders forward, sleeves rolled, hand moving across the sheet, head lowered in concentration. Many quiet jobs have such silhouettes, recognizable across decades. The person changes, the task remains. Tonight the silhouette is yours, and it is enough. When the lamp glow settles over the bench, the day does not end at once, but becomes softer around the edges, and the final batches seem to move through a room already half at rest. The lamp makes a quiet island around your hands. Beyond it, the racks and walls soften into brown and gray, and the bright printed faces hidden beneath the sheets might as well be sleeping already. You draw the brush across another back, watching the gum take the light and then give it back more dimly. The Cincinnati Label Gummer's evening has a slower breath than the morning, but the care is the same. In this hour, you notice the smallest sounds. A brush set down too quickly makes a hollow tap in the tray. Twine pulled through fingers gives a dry whisper. A sheet laid on the rack sighs as air moves beneath it. Somewhere farther off, a door closes, and the sound travels through the old building in softened layers. The workroom receives each noise and lets it settle. Your eyes may feel tired from watching the sheen on paper, so you look away now and then toward the lamp, the window, the darker line of the ceiling. Then you return to the sheet. This small rest keeps the work clean. The body knows how to protect itself when it is allowed to move gently. Even in a shop governed by orders and time, a careful worker finds these little pauses inside the motion. The batch before you is nearly complete, but nearly complete is not complete. The last sheets deserve the same even gum as the first, perhaps more, because tired hands can become uneven if neglected. You remind yourself without words. Set the sheet flat, dip lightly, tap the rim, draw the stroke, watch the corners, lift with both hands, carry to the rack, return to the bench. There is a kind of honesty in doing the last sheet well. No one may know which label came from the beginning of the run and which came from the end. They will be shuffled, cut, wrapped, shipped, and used in their own order. The customer will only know whether the labels hold, so you do not let the final sheet become careless. You give it the same quiet respect as the others. We can stay close to that respect. It is not sentimental, it is practical, and because it is practical, it has deep roots. A worker who saves care only for watched moments cannot trust the work when no one is looking. But you work in a place where much of the good labor becomes invisible, so the care must live in the hand itself. The hand becomes the witness. When the last wet sheet reaches the rack, you stand still for a breath. Your palm hovers in the air, still shaped by the brush. The table is momentarily bare except for the pot, the tray, and a few scraps. That bare space feels wide after so many hours of stacks. You wipe it slowly, moving the rag in long strokes that follow the grain of the wood. The rag drags where gum has dried thin. You add a little water and rub again. The spot loosens, then disappears into the cloth. Beneath it, the table shows old knife marks, darkened seams, and a polish made by elbows and paper. You are not restoring it to newness. Newness would feel strange here. You are returning it to readiness, which is the condition a working bench understands best. As the last wet sheets settle into the rack, the evening work turns from production to patience, and the room begins to ask what can safely wait until morning. Some sheets cannot be hurried down from the rack, no matter how much anyone wants the order wrapped. You test one near the corner, lifting gently. It is dry at the edge, but the center still holds a coolness that tells you to wait. A stack made too soon can block air from the middle and leave the sheets tacky by morning. You set it back. The sheet rests where it is. Waiting is part of the label gummer's job, though it looks like nothing from across the room. You may use the waiting time to wrap finished bundles, rinse a brush, check an order slip, or tidy the table. But underneath those tasks, you are keeping track of what is drying. Your mind holds the map of racks and sheets. This one needs more time. That one can come down. The small map keeps the work calm. A foreman may ask whether a certain batch will be ready tonight. You answer from your fingertips, not from hope. Needs another hour, you might say. Or, by morning. In a good shop, such answers are respected, because paper cannot be talked into readiness. The foreman may sigh, mark the slip, and move on. Your responsibility is not to promise speed, it is to know the material truth. The material truth tonight is that the air has cooled. Drying slows when the room loses warmth, especially if the day has been damp. The lamp adds little heat, and the paste on the sheets gives back moisture gradually. You leave space where you can. You make sure air can pass. You resist the temptation to crowd the racks, because crowded sheets can turn a neat job into a troublesome one. We can feel how patient this knowledge is. It doesn't come from one day. It comes from many evenings when paper was stacked too soon, or dried too hard at the edges, or curled because the window draft was stronger than expected. A mistake becomes memory. Memory becomes adjustment. Adjustment becomes skill. By the time others call it experience, it has already become part of the way you stand. There is a scrap box near the bench. Into it go torn corners, test strips, misprints, spoiled labels, trimmed edges, and wrappers too small to use. The box smells of paper dust and old gum. Sometimes the scraps show pieces of bright advertising cut into nonsense. Half a fruit, the end of a company name, a border with no middle. The fragments are oddly pretty, though no longer useful for their first purpose. You might use a scrap to test the gum before touching a good sheet. You brush a small patch, wait, then feel how it dries. It is a quick habit, a little assurance before committing the whole run. Scrap paper serves the shop in that way. Even waste can teach. It gives the hand a place to ask a question before the answer costs more. The order slips lie under a small weight, so they won't curl or drift. The weight might be a metal slug, a smooth stone, or some leftover piece from the shop's practical life. You lift it, check the notes, and place it back. The slips have their own smell, dry pencil and handling. They are smudged at the edges from many fingers. By evening, they feel almost as tired as the workers. An order from a soap maker may call for clean, bright labels that must not show any stain through the face. Soap packaging likes cleanliness in every visible line, even if the factory that makes it is full of steam, fat, alkali, and hard work. You handle such labels with especially clean fingers. The irony is gentle, not sharp. A clean label often passes through many unglamorous hands before it reaches a shelf. A food label asks for another kind of neatness. A jar of preserves, a packet of spice, a tin of tomatoes, all need a face that suggests wholesomeness and order. The printed picture may show fruit without bruises, fields without mud, kitchens without clutter. Behind that picture, your gum must be plain and dependable. You work on the back of the promise, and the promise stands because the back holds. As the order book stays open under the lamplight, each customer name becomes less like a business and more like a small demand placed gently into your hands. One name may be familiar from repeated runs. You know their stock, their colors, their usual quantities, and the way their labels behave when damp. Another name may be new, with paper you haven't handled before. The first sheet of a new order is always a little conversation. You don't assume, you test pressure, watch absorption, and let the material introduce itself. Familiar work can still surprise you. This is especially true when paper is changed to save money or meet a shortage. A customer may order the same label on a thinner stock, and the shop must adjust. The printed front looks nearly the same, but the back tells another story. It takes gum differently, curls differently, dries with a different feel. You notice before the customer ever would. That noticing is part of why the room needs you. In the 1920s, business language may speak of efficiency, modern packaging, and larger markets. But at the bench, efficiency means the right motion repeated without waste. It means a pot kept covered, a brush cleaned before it stiffens, and a sheet not spoiled by impatience. Large words become useful only when they reach the hand. Your hand prefers simpler instructions: even coat, clean edge, let dry. The lamplight hums faintly if the fixture is electric, or glows with a steadier softness if another kind of lamp is used in a smaller or older room. By this decade, many Cincinnati shops have electric light, though not always evenly arranged. Shadows still matter. You turn the sheet to catch the shine. A poor angle can hide a missed place. Good light is a tool, and you use it with the same care as the brush. There are marks on the wall where old calendars hung. A nail, a faded rectangle, perhaps a current calendar shows a local bank, an insurance office, or a supplier of paper and ink. The picture above the dates might show a landscape cleaner than the city outside. You glance at it now and then, without really seeing it. The true calendar of your day is still the stack shrinking and the rack filling. The shrinking stack has a particular encouragement. It doesn't cheer or demand. It simply becomes lower under your hand. You can see progress in its reduced height, in the wrapped bundles nearby, in the order slips moved from one side to another. For work that repeats, visible progress matters. It tells the tired mind that repetition is going somewhere. The stack becomes a quiet measure of hope. If the stack is very large, you learn not to stare at its height too much. You take it in smaller piles, a portion near the board, the rest set aside. The mind rests better when the immediate task is sized to the hand. This is not self-deception. It is sound practice. All large labor must pass through a present moment, and the present moment can only hold so much. We keep returning to this because the label gummer's job is a teacher of small portions. One sheet cannot be gummed in the abstract. It must be laid down, touched, lifted, and dried. 1,000 labels become manageable because paper accepts attention one surface at a time. The same could be said of many burdens, though we needn't press the thought. We can simply let the brush say it. When the order slips are marked and the known work is sorted, the evening gives you a little space to check what earlier hours may have hidden. You look for curled corners along the rack edges. You look for sheets that dried with a ridge where gum gathered. You look for dust specks that may be brushed away if caught early. The lamp must be moved closer for some of this, and its shade warms your wrist when you reach beneath it. Shadows from the rack slats fall across the paper in narrow bands. You tilt each sheet until the surface reveals itself. The paper's backside at this hour has a moon-like quality, pale, slightly uneven, full of small textures. It is not blank once you know how to read it. Fibers run in faint directions. Gum dulls and darkens some places more than others. A repaired corner shows a different shine. Dryness has its own color. You can see the history of the afternoon spread thinly across each sheet. Some sheets must be turned so air reaches another part. You do this carefully, because even a nearly dry sheet can take a mark if handled roughly. The paper edge touches your fingertips with a fine, dry tickle. The middle has a cool softness. You turn, lay, smooth, and withdraw your hand. It is almost like tending laundry, though flatter, more delicate, and scented with starch instead of soap. The comparison is natural because many industrial processes borrow gestures from household work: brushing, smoothing, drying, folding, tying, sorting, washing. The scale changes, the materials change, the wages and hours change, but the body recognizes the motions. A worker often carries knowledge from home into the shop, and from the shop back into home. Your hands are not divided neatly between worlds. At home, perhaps, you have pasted a torn bookplate, sealed an envelope, wrapped a parcel, or smoothed paper over a jar. After a day at the bench, those small domestic acts feel different. You know more than you did before. You know why corners lift, and why too much paste wrinkles paper. The trade follows you into ordinary life, not loudly, but through better fingers. The room's warmth continues to fade. You may close another window or move a drying rack away from a draft. The air against your forearms is cooler now, and the paste on the pot rim has stiffened. A late worker from another room passes by with his hat already on, carrying a lunch pail that knocks lightly against his leg. He nods, and you nod back. Words are not required. A shop at this hour is full of half departures. One machine stopped, another still running. One table cleared, another active. One worker washed, another waiting for a batch to dry. The building doesn't end its day all at once. It settles in stages, like a stove cooling after supper. You stand in one of those stages, neither fully working nor fully finished, holding the last details together. There is a quiet responsibility in being among the last near a wet rack. If a sheet slips, you will see it. If a window draft rises, you will feel it. If a pot is left uncovered, you will notice. These are not grand duties, but they preserve the work of many hours. The end of a day can undo the beginning if no one attends to it. So you attend. As the building settles in stages, your own attention settles more deeply into the final tender tasks that keep tomorrow from beginning in disorder. You check the brushes once more. The broad brush lies flat, bristles clean and damp, handle darkened from washing. A smaller brush rests beside it, used for edges and repairs. You run a thumb lightly over the bristles to make sure no gum remains near the base. Hardened gum there can make the brush fan badly by morning. Better to find it now, while water is still at hand. The basin has cooled. When your fingers enter it, the chill is enough to make the joints tighten. You rinse the small brush anyway, pressing gently, watching pale clouds lift and vanish. The water smells less sweet now and more stale, a sign that the day's dissolved paste, dust and handling have all come together in it. You empty or set it aside according to the shop's habit. Even dirty water has its proper place. The paste paddle stands in the pot, and you scrape it clean against the rim before washing it. The paddle is a humble object, flat, stained, and slightly warped from use. It has mixed more mornings than anyone bothers to count. When clean, it dries quickly, leaving raised grain against your palm. You lay it near the pot, where the first worker tomorrow will find it without searching. A covered pot makes a soft, complete shape. Tin lid on round vessel, weight settled, contents protected. You press the lid down and feel a little give from the paste beneath. The air cannot reach it so easily now. The surface will keep better. This small act has a bedtime quality of its own, as though the day's adhesive has been tucked in and told to wait. The stack of finished bundles receives a final glance. Twine knots, pencil marks, brown wrappers, squared edges. You touch the top bundle lightly, not because it needs touching, but because the hand wants confirmation. The wrapper is dry and a little rough. Under it, the labels are still, their gummed backs hidden again. They have passed from wetness to readiness under your care. The damp sheets left on racks are more vulnerable, so your glance there is slower. You count without speaking, matching them to the notes in the order book. One rack for the jar labels, one for the small tins, one for the household polish run that needed extra drying. The names are less important now than the condition of the paper. Dry enough. Not yet. Leave open. Check first thing. We can sense how the room's memory is being arranged through these notes and placements. A future self, perhaps tomorrow morning's you, will enter with cold hands and need to know where to begin. Tonight's order becomes morning's kindness. That is one of the quiet courtesies workers extend across time, leaving tools and materials so the next hour can start without confusion. A pencil note is tucked beneath a weight. Polish labels on second rack still damp at center. The words are plain and useful. No flourish, no extra explanation. In a shop, good notes are like clean edges, valued because they do what they are meant to do. You read it once, perhaps, then place the pencil down where it belongs. Its wood has tooth marks from someone else and a flat side from rolling against the bench. The last sweep of the floor gathers paper lint, trimmed slivers, dust, and dried flecks of gum. The broom bristles rasp softly along the boards. You push the little pile toward a dustpan, taking care near the legs of the racks. The motion is slower than brushing labels, broader and lower. It changes the posture of the body, letting the back bend differently. Even cleanup gives variety to tired muscles. Sweeping has its own smell, raising dust that carries paper, floor wax, coal soot, and old paste. You pause if it drifts too close, then continue. The floor looks only slightly changed afterward, yet it is changed enough. A clean path prevents slips, protects fallen sheets, and makes the room feel ready. Much of maintenance is modest like that. The effect is quiet, but the absence of it would be loud. When the floor is done, you lean the broom in its corner. It stands with other long-handled things, worn by hands and years. The corner is dark now, the bristles barely visible. Tomorrow, someone will take it up again, perhaps without noticing how neatly it was placed. That is all right. Tools need to be findable more than thanked. You leave it findable. And with the tools cleaned, the floor swept, and the damp sheets safely spaced, the evening's attention moves from the room itself to the body that has worked within it. Your shoulders lower when the last required task is done. You may not have realized they were raised. The body often waits until permission to feel its tiredness. Your feet are warm and sore inside your shoes. Your hands feel large, as if the day's repeated motions have thickened them. The skin near your nails is pale where water has softened it, and shiny in places where gum dried and was washed away. You put your apron aside. If the shop provides hooks, yours may hang among others, each apron marked by the trade of the person who wore it. Ink stains, paste marks, paper dust, perhaps a stitched repair near a pocket. Cloth remembers work in visible ways. You smooth the front before hanging it, more from habit than necessity. A hung apron tells the body the shift is nearly over. Your shirt sleeves come down over forearms cooled by evening air. The fabric catches slightly on damp skin. You fasten a button if it will cooperate, or leave it if your fingers are tired. A coat goes on next, carrying the outside world in its lining. Street air, old smoke, maybe a faint trace of rain from the morning. You are becoming less a worker at a bench and more a person leaving a building. Still, the work clings softly. You can feel the brushing motion if you close your hand. You can see the pale backs of labels when you blink. You can smell paste under the soap. This after-image of labor is common. A typesetter may see lines of type. A pressman may feel the machine rhythm. A label gummer feels the sweep of the brush and the lift of damp paper. We can follow that feeling without making it heavy. It is simply the body remembering what occupied it. As you step away from the bench, the motion remains in the wrist, fading gradually like the last vibration of a bell. It may even be pleasant, because the motion has become orderly. The body carries order for a while after leaving the ordered task. The room behind you is dimmer now. The lamp may remain for another worker, or it may be turned down or switched off once everyone has gone. If it stays on, the racks cast long shadows across the floor. If it goes off, the window light and hallway glow leave the room in soft outlines. Either way, the sheets continue drying. Processes do not always stop when hands leave them. Some continue by air and time. That thought is restful. You have done what required touch, and now air will do what air can do. The labels need no more from you for the moment. They only need to lie still. There is a lesson in knowing when to stop touching something. Too much handling can damage what care has prepared, so you step back, trusting the quiet part of the process. The hallway receives your footsteps again. At this hour, it holds echoes more clearly than before. A voice from downstairs, the click of a lock, the shuffle of someone putting on gloves. You pass the press room, where the machines rest under dim light, their metal surfaces reflecting dull highlights. Oil smell lingers. Ink smell lingers. The day's labor has soaked into the building. At the outer door, the air may be colder than you expect. It touches your face first, then your hands. You pause just long enough to adjust. Behind you is past warmth and paper dust. Ahead is street air, smoke, food smells, damp pavement, and the wide evening of Cincinnati. The change is complete, but not abrupt. One atmosphere gives you to another. As you step out from the print shop, the label gummer's bench, remains arranged behind you, while the city opens its slower evening routes ahead. The sidewalk has its own texture underfoot, uneven in places, gritty near the curb. If rain has fallen, gaslight or electric light trembles in the wet patches. If the evening is dry, dust rises faintly when a truck passes. You walk with the pace of someone who has stood all day, not hurried, but steady. The body prefers a gentle rhythm after bench work. Too fast would feel strange. Cincinnati's hills darken above the flatter streets. Windows begin to glow one by one. Streetcars move along their lines with a sound that seems both mechanical and domestic, part city and part habit. The bell rings, not sharply in this telling, but clearly enough to mark a crossing. People step down, step up, carry parcels, speak quietly, and disappear into their own evenings. You are one among them. If you pass a shop window, labels face you from shelves. Some are bright and clean under glass. Others are plain and practical, meant more for recognition than beauty. You may slow without meaning to, noticing whether their corners lie flat. This is the occupational glance, the worker's private inspection of the world. A carpenter sees joints, a printer sees type. You see adhesion, alignment, and the small success of paper staying where it was placed. There is no need to correct anything. The window is only a window, and you are going home. But the glance brings a small thread of continuity between your bench and the street. The goods on the shelf did not arrive there by magic. They came through many hands, and one kind of hand was yours. That awareness need not be proud to be comforting. It simply places you inside the city's making. A bakery may be closing, releasing a warm smell of bread through a door left open. A butcher may be washing down a counter. A grocer may be drawing shades or bringing in crates from the sidewalk. Everywhere, little endings are happening. Floors swept, scales covered, ledgers closed, lamps lowered. The end of work has many forms, and tonight, yours included covered paste and drying labels. You might carry your lunch pail, lighter now, or a folded newspaper, or nothing at all. Your hands feel free and a little uncertain in the open air. They have no sheet to lift, no brush to hold, no stack to square. You put them in your coat pockets, where they find lint, a coin, perhaps a bit of string saved without thinking. Work has a way of filling pockets with humble things. The streetcar stop may be near. You wait with others. Each person turns slightly inward by the day's fatigue. No one needs to explain where they have been. The evidence is in shoes, cuffs, smells, posture, and silence. A woman beside you smells faintly of laundry steam. A man ahead smells of machine oil. You smell, if anyone notices, of soap trying gently to cover paste. The city's labor stands in a small cluster under evening light. When the car arrives, its doors open with a familiar sound. You step up, pay your fare, and find a seat if one is free. The wooden bench is hard, but sitting still feels good. The car starts with a pull that moves through everyone at once. You look through the window as the shop district begins to slide away. Reflections of passengers float over storefronts, making the inside and outside overlap. The motion of the streetcar is smoother than walking, but still full of small jolts. Each jolt travels through the spine, the knees, the tired soles of the feet. You let it happen. Your hands rest in your lap, and the fingers curl naturally. The brushing motion fades a little more. In its place comes the rhythm of wheels over track. A longer rhythm, carrying you beyond the gumming room, while the mind loosens its hold. We can remain with you there, not rushing past the ride. Sleep often comes more easily in a vehicle's gentle sway, when the body is held by motion it does not have to make. The streetcar rocks, hums, slows, and starts again. Voices rise and fall. A conductor moves through with practiced balance. Outside, Cincinnati's evening gathers in windows, signs, and damp flashes of rail. A child across the aisle may hold a paper-wrapped parcel with a printed label on it. You notice the edge, smooth and secure. Perhaps it is not one of yours. Perhaps it is. The possibility is enough. The label faces outward, doing its small job of naming. No one in the car studies the back. No one thinks of gum. You do, but softly, with the day already passing into memory. As the streetcar rocks through the evening, the labels you prepared rest in darkness behind you, and tomorrow's work waits without impatience. Tomorrow may bring a different run entirely. Bottle labels in long bands, flat carton labels, tin labels with bright borders, paper seals for boxes, small trade stickers for a local supplier. The variety lives inside sameness. The bench, pot, brush, and rack remain, while the paper changes its behavior and the printed fronts change their faces. You return to the same motions and meet new materials within them. This is why the job is less monotonous than it might appear. Repetition creates the frame, but the details keep the senses awake. The gum is thicker in the morning than after lunch. A new stock curls against the grain. A certain blue ink smells stronger. A customer's labels are always trimmed close. A rack near the window dries faster on windy days. Your mind collects these facts without making a show of collecting. A person outside the trade might not know what label gumming means. They might picture someone licking stamps all day, which is not quite right, and would miss the room entirely. The true work is more material, more deliberate, more tied to batches, brushes, paste mixtures, racks, drying, and careful stacking. It belongs to the industrial life of paper, where small surfaces are prepared for later use. It is both simple and exact. In the 1920s, pressure-sensitive labels, the kind that peel from a backing and stick without water, are not yet the ordinary thing they will become later. Much still depends on water-activated gum and the workers who apply it well. This places you in a particular moment before certain conveniences hide the process even further. Adhesion is still visible as labor. It has a smell, a pot, a brush, and drying time. The thought of that earlier world is soothing because it slows the object down. A label is not instant. It begins as paper, receives ink, dries, is cut or gummed, dries again, is bundled, delivered, dampened, applied, pressed, and left to hold. Each stage has hands and air in it. When we slow down enough to see those stages, ordinary packaging becomes a chain of patient acts. You are one act in that chain, not the beginning, not the end. A middle act, and middle acts are often overlooked because they connect more than they announce. Yet without the middle, beginnings cannot become endings. The printed sheet cannot become a reliable label without the prepared back. The package cannot present its name if the paper falls away. Your middle work holds the visible world together quietly. The streetcar turns, and the city angle shifts outside the window. Hills, row houses, shop fronts, factory walls, church steeples, overhead wires, and darkening sky arrange themselves differently with each block. You are tired enough to watch without needing to think much. The city becomes a moving stack of impressions, each one sliding past like sheets lifted from a pile. This, too, has a rhythm. If you live near others from the shop, someone may get off at the same stop. You might walk a short way together in companionable quiet. After a day of shared air, conversation is optional. A remark about the weather may be enough, or a note that tomorrow's order looks large. Then paths divide. Each worker carries the shop home in small traces, and the building remains behind, holding the rest. At home, the first thing you do may be washing again. Work washing and home washing are not the same. At the shop, you wash enough to leave. At home, you wash to return to yourself. Warm water, if there is some, softens what remains near the nails. Soap lifts the last smell of paste. A towel from home feels different from the shop towel, perhaps softer, perhaps simply more familiar. Your evening meal may be plain: bread, potatoes, soup, beans, a little meat if there is some, coffee, tea, or milk. After standing all day, sitting at a table has a deep pleasure. The hands that held the brush now hold a spoon, a cup, a piece of bread. The motions are smaller and more personal. The body shifts from production to nourishment, from the shop's needs to its own. We won't leave the subject too far, because the script belongs to the label Gummer's life, and the workday shapes even the hours after it. You may notice the label on a tin at supper, You may turn a jar without meaning to and press down a corner that has lifted. Someone might smile at that habit. You may smile too. The hand keeps working in miniature long after the shift has ended. The label at home could be from another city, another shop, another gummer's bench. That thought widens the quiet. Across the country, in rooms large and small, people prepare paper for packages they will never use. They mix paste, feed machines, cut stock, wrap bundles, and send them outward. Your Cincinnati bench is one among many, but tonight it is the one we know best. It has become intimate through attention. As home and shop softly overlap in these small after-work habits, the next day's bench begins to form again in memory before morning ever arrives. Morning comes first as light behind curtains, then as sound. A wagon or truck outside, a neighbor's steps, a factory whistle far enough away to be softened by distance. You dress for work again, choosing clothes that can accept paste, dust, and standing. The body may still feel yesterday in the wrist, but the ache is familiar. It is not a command to stop. It is simply part of the weather inside the hands. The trip back to the shop reverses the evening route, though no route is ever exactly the same twice. Morning faces are different from evening faces. People carry more purpose and less release. The streetcar smells of wool, damp newspapers, hair tonic, tobacco, and early coffee. You stand if there are no seats, holding a strap with fingers that will soon hold a brush. The city moves toward work in a shared hush. When you reach the print shop, the building seems to wake in layers. The outer door opens to cooler hallway air. The press room may already have a few men moving among machines, oiling, checking, preparing. The gumming room waits with a stillness that is not empty, because yesterday's sheets are on the racks. You enter and read the room, as if reading a note left by someone you trust. The damp sheets have dried overnight. You test them with a fingertip. No coolness, no tack. Perhaps a slight curl at the edges, but nothing serious. The note under the weight was accurate. You can bring them down, stack them, and continue the order. Morning begins with the success of last night's patience. This is one of the quiet rewards of leaving things properly. You lift the first overnight sheet from the rack. It releases cleanly. The paper is dry and light now, no longer sagging with moisture. The gum layer is invisible except for a faint change in texture. You flex the corner gently, then lay it on the table. One after another, the sheets come down, and the rack empties like a tree losing pale leaves in slow, careful order. Stacking overnight sheets has a crisp pleasure. They are cool from the room, but dry enough to square. The edges align with a papery tap. You press the stack under a board or weight if it needs flattening before wrapping. The weight is not heavy enough to crush, only enough to remind the paper of flatness. Paper can be persuaded if the request is steady and reasonable. The paste pot is uncovered. The surface has kept fairly well, with only a thin film at the edge. You remove what should not be stirred in, because a skin can leave lumps. Beneath it, the gum is still usable, though it needs warming or thinning. You stir slowly, watching texture return. The smell rises again, and the new day joins the old through that familiar sweetness. A fresh batch may be made if needed. Dry powder, water, heat, stirring, rest. The process is not elaborate, but it must be done with care. Lumps form if the mixing is too careless. Scorching can spoil the smell and strength. Too much water weakens the hold. Too little makes the brush drag. The paste maker, whether you or someone else, performs a quiet preparation before the visible work begins. We can picture the paste warming in a plain vessel, thickening into usefulness. Steam fogs the nearest cool surface. A wooden paddle moves through it in slow circles. The mixture changes from separate ingredients into one smooth body. This transformation is humble, but every label in the day may depend on it. Before the brush, before the rack, before the bundle, there is the pot. The first sheet of the new day is always a test of both material and person. Your hand may be slightly stiff. The room may be cool. The paste may be waking. You don't judge the whole day by that first stroke. You let it teach you what adjustments are needed. A little more water, a warmer position for the pot, a slower lift from the board. The morning and the worker find each other gradually. As the new day's paste loosens and the overnight sheets become finished bundles, the cycle of the label gummer's work folds yesterday and today into one continuous motion. There is comfort in cycles because they spare the mind from beginning out of nothing. Yesterday left clues, today follows them. The work does not start with a blank question, but with a stack, a note, a pot, a rack, and tools already known. You step into the ongoing process. The room does not ask you to invent yourself. It asks you to take up your place. The place is physical. Your feet know where to stand. Your hand knows where the brush rests. Your eye knows the distance to the rack. Your body turns before the mind names the turn. This kind of familiarity is not flashy, but it is deeply calming. A familiar place reduces the number of decisions a tired person must make. It lets attention go where it is truly needed. The first customer order today may be for a Cincinnati food packer, whose labels show red fruit and green leaves. The colors are cheerful on the front, but the back remains quiet. You lay the sheet face down and think about the jars they may someday cover. Fruit labels often need to look abundant, even if the paperback is the same plain surface as any other. The work separates image from function, then joins them again through gum. You spread the adhesive with a slightly lighter hand because the stock is thin. The brush makes a soft dragging sound, less wet than yesterday's heavy carton labels. You watch the sheen. You lift, the sheet flexes easily. At the rack, you lay it with a little extra space, so curling edges won't touch the next sheet. Already the order has told you its temperament. Some papers are agreeable, some are fussy. Workers may speak of them almost as personalities, not because paper has moods, but because repeated behavior invites familiar language. This stock fights the brush. That one drinks too much. This one lies nice. Such phrases keep practical knowledge close to the tongue. They make the material easier to remember and share. If a sheet is too thin, gum can strike through, darkening or disturbing the printed face. You guard against that by using less moisture and more even pressure. Strike-through is one of those troubles that may not show immediately if you're inattentive. Later, the front looks stained or dulled, and the cause traces back to the hidden side. So you keep the coat restrained, letting the paper take only what it can bear. This restraint is a form of kindness. The material is not forced to be stronger than it is. It is handled according to its nature. A thin sheet receives a thin coat. A heavier sheet receives more. A curled sheet is coaxed. A stubborn sheet is weighted. The worker learns that sameness of treatment is not fairness. Fairness in the shop means giving each material what lets it do its job well. We can carry that thought gently, then let it dissolve back into the bench. The brush moves. The gum shines. The rack fills. There is no need to turn every act into a lesson, though lessons appear if the mind is quiet enough. Mostly you are working. Mostly you are working. Flyer. The meaning stays low and warm, like heat stored in wood. A messenger arrives with new printed stock from another room. The sheets are carried flat, wrapped loosely to protect them from dust. He sets them on a side table and gives you the order slip. The paper is still faintly cool, and the ink smell is fresh. You do not begin at once. You let the stack sit, because rushing fresh ink into the gumming process can cause trouble. Waiting, again, becomes part of doing. The messenger leaves, and his footsteps fade down the hall. You return to the current batch. It is tempting to glance at the new stock, because new work always tugs at attention. But the sheet under your brush deserves completion. The room offers many small distractions, and the label gummer learns to acknowledge them without leaving the present motion. This is another quiet discipline of the bench. By mid-morning the air warms, coats come off, the paste flows more easily. The first stiffness leaves the hand. Outside, Cincinnati grows louder, though the shop walls hold the noise at a distance. You may hear a horn, a wheel, a shouted greeting, and then the press covers them again. The city is a restless body beyond the room, while your task remains measured and close. When the morning fully settles, the label gummer's pace becomes neither beginning nor ending, but the smooth middle of the workday, where time is counted in racks and drying sheets. The smooth middle is where skill hides most completely. A visitor might see only repetition because nothing appears to go wrong. That is exactly the point. Your small adjustments prevent visible trouble. You thin the paste before it drags. You shift sheets before they touch. You wipe the board before a smear transfers. You set aside a questionable stock before it enters the main stack. Good work often looks uneventful. Uneventful does not mean empty. Your senses are full. The brush is damp and smooth. The table edge presses lightly against your hip when you lean. The room smells of paste, ink, paper, oil, and morning coffee fading from cups. Light from the window changes as clouds pass. A co-worker's sleeve brushes a stack nearby. The press rhythm enters the bones more than the ears. You may mark progress by the paste level, the number of filled racks, or the lowering of the stockpile. The clock matters, but these measures feel more direct. A clock can move while nothing useful happens. A rack fills only when hands have worked. There is a grounded honesty in that. You trust the evidence of objects arranged differently than they were an hour before. A small tear appears near the edge of one sheet as you lift it. You stop, lower it back to the board, and inspect the damage. The tear may fall outside the printed area after cutting, or it may spoil part of the run. You decide and set it accordingly. The decision takes only a moment, but it carries economy, quality, and experience together. Then the next sheet receives your full attention. A co-worker asks for the warm water and you pass the pitcher. The handle is damp from your own fingers. He thanks you without looking up, already thinking about his task. Such exchanges stitch the shop together. Nothing grand, just water passed, twine shared, a warning offered, a stack lifted together when it is too awkward for one person. Human warmth often lives in these unremarkable helps. The label room has a temperature of its own by now, not hot, not cold, but warmed by bodies, paste, lamps, and the day's accumulated work. The air at the window is cooler. The air near the pot is sweeter and damp. If you step away, then return, you notice it more clearly. While standing inside it, the smell becomes background, part of what the room means. Background smells can stay in memory for years. Later, a little paste, a damp envelope, a stack of old paper, or a warm print shop smell might return the whole room to you. The bench, the racks, the window, the dull tap of brush on pot. Work enters memory through the senses before it enters stories. That is why we describe it slowly tonight, letting each sense take its turn. As the room's warmth and rhythm deepen, the work opens into the quiet human details that surround the bench without pulling you away from it. You may keep a small personal item near your place if the shop allows it. A handkerchief, a pocket knife, a folded note, a piece of candy saved for late afternoon. Such objects do not interfere with the work, but they soften the edge between person and station. The bench belongs to the company perhaps, but the way you arrange your small things makes the hours more bearable. A handkerchief is useful for more than the nose. It can wrap a tender finger, wipe a forehead, protect a clean cuff, or cover a small personal item from dust. Workers often ask much from simple cloth. Yours may smell faintly of home soap beneath the shop odors. When you lift it, even briefly, it brings another room into this one. Then it folds away again, and the brush resumes. A pocket knife may trim twine, open a wrapper, or scrape dried gum from a stubborn corner of the bench. Its handle is worn smooth from many uses unrelated to labels. The blade is practical, kept sharp enough for string and paper, not admired for itself. You use it carefully, then close it and return it to your pocket. The small click is satisfying, a clean end to a small task. If you bring a sweet, it might be a peppermint, a piece of hard candy, or something wrapped in paper that crackles softly. You save it for when the paste smell grows too heavy or the mouth feels dry. The sweetness is brief, but it changes the air around your own breathing. Mint against starch, sugar against dust. A small kindness held under the tongue while the hands continue. Lunch comes again in its ordinary way, not as a feast, but as a needed pause. Before leaving the bench, you cover the pot, lay the brush correctly, and check that no wet sheet is placed poorly. The routine of stopping matters as much as the routine of starting. You don't abandon work mid-breath. You leave it in a condition that will receive you after the break. The lunch hour has its own landscape of sounds. Paper unwrapping, thermos cups opening, chair legs, low talk, a laugh that rises and falls quickly, not enough to startle the room. Someone may read a line from the newspaper. Someone else may complain mildly about the weather. You listen, chew, rest your hands, and let your eyes look at something farther away than a sheet of paper. Your food tastes stronger because the morning has been full of paste and ink. Bread has more grain. Coffee has more bitterness. An apple has a clean snap that feels almost bright after the soft textures of paper and gum. You eat without hurry if the break allows it. The body receives food and begins quietly preparing for the afternoon's repetitions. After lunch, hands can feel clumsy for a few minutes. Warmth, food, and stillness soften the morning edge. You return to the bench gently, not forcing speed too soon. The first sheet after lunch is another little beginning. You test the paste, check the rack, and let the brush remind the wrist of its path. Soon the rhythm comes back, as familiar as a street you have walked for years, and as the lunch pause folds back into labor, the afternoon brings heavier light, slower air, and the steady need to keep the work even. Afternoon light in the shop is less innocent than morning light. It shows dust more plainly. It stretches shadows from the rack slats. It finds the tired places in faces and hands. Your own hand looks different under it, with gum shining near the nail and a small red mark where paper cut too close. You notice, then continue. The work allows little observations to pass without becoming interruptions. The afternoon order may be a run of labels for a hardware product, perhaps oil, polish, screws, or some household repair item sold in a small tin or carton. The printed design is plainer, darker, more practical. It may use black lettering, a red border, or a sturdy emblem meant to suggest reliability. The back, again, is your concern. Hardware labels may face rougher handling, so the gum must be dependable. You choose a slightly stronger coat if the stock can take it. The brush moves more slowly at the edges. The sheet feels heavier than the morning's fruit labels. It accepts the gum with less curl, and that is pleasant. Heavy stock can be forgiving, though it asks more paste and takes longer to dry. Every material offers one comfort and one demand. The worker learns both. The paste pot empties faster with heavy stock. You call for more, or fetch it, depending on the shop's arrangement. The new paste is warmer, and when it mixes with the older batch, the texture changes. You stir until the difference disappears. Uneven paste can leave uneven results. The pot must become one thing before the sheet can receive one coat. This simple mixing is part of the hidden order. A label gummer's hands may become rough over time. Paper dries the skin, paste dries and tightens. Washing removes what oils the skin might have kept. Some workers use a little salve at night, or rub the hands with grease, or simply accept the roughness as part of the trade. You may know the sting of soap in small cracks. You may also know the calm of hands that can still perform delicate work despite rough skin. There is dignity in rough hands doing careful tasks. The world sometimes imagines delicacy and roughness as opposites, but work often joins them. A hand can be cracked at the knuckle and still feel a tiny ridge in gum. A palm can be calloused and still lift damp paper without tearing it. Your hands are not ornamental. They are instruments shaped by use, and their knowledge is quiet. We can let the afternoon rest on those hands. The right hand guides the brush. The left steadies the sheet. Both lift, carry, smooth, stack, tie, and wash. They receive cold, warmth, wetness, dryness, pressure, and texture. They are always meeting the world first. A label gummer's day is recorded in them more faithfully than in any ledger. The heavy hardware labels dry slowly. You arrange them with enough space, then check the earlier fruit labels, which are ready to stack. This overlapping of batches keeps the afternoon from becoming idle. While one order dries, another is wrapped. While one paste cools, another pot warms. The room is a set of interlocking weights, and you move among them with practiced calm. At times, the work resembles tending several small fires. Though nothing here burns, each batch has its state. Freshly gummed, half dry, ready to stack, needs flattening, ready to wrap. You remember them by place and feel. The racks become a map of time, and you walk that map without needing to draw it. The body knows which shelf to check next. As the afternoon batches overlap, your attention widens from the single sheet to the room's whole slow arrangement of drying, stacking, and readiness. This wider attention is different from the narrow concentration of brushing. It is softer at the edges. You take in the racks, the orders, the clock, the paste level, the co-worker waiting for space, and the delivery shelf that must be filled before the day ends. None of these should crowd the mind too much. You let them remain like objects on a table, each visible, none shouting. A rack near the window holds fruit labels, now dry enough to remove. You lift them one by one, enjoying their lightness after the heavier stock. They make a clean sound as they join the stack. The printed fronts flash briefly when a sheet turns, red fruit and green leaves appearing and vanishing. The faces are lively, but the backs are calm. You square them into a neat block. Another rack holds the hardware labels, still cool at the center. You leave them. This leaving is active, not forgetful. The decision preserves the work. You make a pencil mark on the order slip because the room's map should not depend entirely on memory. The pencil line is small, but it carries the judgment of your fingertip. Still drying. Check later. The note joins the process. The wrapping station is ready with brown paper cut to size. You place the fruit label stack in the center and fold the wrapper around it. The corners must be snug but not crushed. You crease with the side of your thumb. Twine crosses once, turns, crosses again, and tightens. The knot sits flat. A good parcel has a contained look, like a task that has learned how to rest. You mark the parcel with the customer name. The pencil drags slightly over the brown paper. If a stamp is used instead, it lands with a padded thump, leaving ink that smells fresh for a moment. The parcel goes to the outgoing shelf. Another order has moved one step farther from your hands. The shelf grows fuller, and the day grows more complete without announcing itself. A worker from delivery may come by to see what will be ready. His interest is practical. He needs to know the route, the load, the timing. You tell him which bundles are finished and which must wait. He may lift one parcel, testing weight, then set it back. Delivery work has its own touch, its own knowledge of balance, weather, and streets. Your careful wrapping becomes part of his easier handling. The connection between your bench and his cart is brief but real. If your bundles are loose, his job becomes harder. If he throws them carelessly, yours can be spoiled. So both trades depend on a kind of mutual restraint. This is how a shop functions when it functions well. Each person handles the work as something received and something to be passed on. The delivery man leaves, and the room returns to its quieter sound. You check the hardware labels again. Not yet. The center still holds coolness. You give them time and turn to a small repair pile. Repairs are often saved for in-between moments because they require attention but not a full setup. A missed edge, a thin corner, a label pulled slightly during drying. Small things, but worth correcting. Repair work has a slower, almost mending quality. The smaller brush touches only what is needed. You hold the sheet steady, apply gum with a light stroke, and place it flat again. The gesture resembles mending cloth, touching up paint, or smoothing a loose seam. It is exact and quiet. The room seems to lean inward around such work, though perhaps that is only your own focus narrowing. A repaired sheet may not be perfect, but it may be perfectly usable. The distinction matters. Industrial work often seeks consistency, yet it also relies on judgment about what must be discarded. and what can be saved. Waste nothing useful, send nothing unfit. Between those two sayings lies much of the worker's practical conscience. You live there many times a day. As repairs fill the waiting spaces, the afternoon continues in layers, each layer bringing another small decision made by touch rather than haste. The hardware labels are ready at last. You know before you lift them fully. The corner feels dry, and the center has lost its coolness. You remove the first sheet, then another, stacking them with their edges aligned. Heavier stock falls into place with a deeper sound than thin paper. The stack grows firm quickly. It has a satisfying weight under your hands. You place a board over the stack for a short while to settle any curl. The board is smooth on one side and stained on the other. It has been used for pressing, carrying, shielding, and perhaps once as a temporary writing surface. In a shop, flat boards become useful for many purposes. This one now lends its weight to the labels, reminding them to lie together. While the stack rests, you prepare the wrapper. Brown paper is pulled from a roll or taken from a pile already cut. It has a fibrous dry resistance. You smooth it with your palm, then turn the label stack onto it. The weight feels good, solid and finished. Fold, crease, twine. The motions are familiar enough to soothe the tired mind, but exact enough to keep it present. The order slip is checked once more. Quantity, customer, gum note, delivery time. You compare the slip with the bundles. The check is not distrust. It is care at the boundary between one stage and another. Once the bundle leaves, errors become harder to correct. So you pause, read, touch, and confirm. Then the parcel joins the others, and the shelf accepts it. By late afternoon, your bench may finally show a little open space. Not empty, but less crowded. The paste pot sits lower. The brush rests between uses. The racks hold fewer wet sheets than before. The room has passed through its busiest fullness and begun to lean toward evening again. This lean is gentle, almost physical, like a person turning toward a door long before walking through it. Still, a final small order waits. It would be easy to resent it if the tone of the day were harsher, but tonight we let it arrive softly. It is a modest run, perhaps for a local stationer, apothecary, or maker of household goods. The paper is agreeable, the stack not too high. You can finish the gumming before cleanup if the strokes remain steady. The day offers one more manageable task. You lay the first sheet down. The gum spreads cleanly. After the heavy labels, this stock feels almost light enough to float. The brush moves with less resistance, and your wrist appreciates the change. A late task can feel easier when the material is kind. You notice this with a small inward gratitude, not directed at anyone in particular, just received as part of the day. The final small order has a calming effect. It gives the last working hour a clear shape, not too much, not too vague, enough to occupy the hands until the day can close properly. You work without rushing, knowing there is time if the motions remain efficient. The room sounds are familiar now, and the light is beginning to turn again toward evening. As the last small order takes its place on the bench, the day's long circle begins to close without closing the story, because there is always another sheet, another morning, another quiet batch waiting beyond this one. The gum sheets from the final order line the rack in a neat row. Their backs catch the lamp glow in a soft, damp sheen. You stand for a moment and look at them, not admiring exactly, but checking, receiving, making sure they have what they need. The room has grown quieter. Some workers have left. Others are finishing their own last tasks. The building seems to lower its voice. You wipe a smear from the board before it dries. The rag is damp and cool. It leaves a darker streak on the wood that fades as air reaches it. You rinse the brush lightly, since it may be needed once more for a touch-up. Then lay it across the tray. Every object is moving toward rest, but none has arrived there completely. The in-between state is familiar and calm. A label gummer's evening is full of these in-between moments. Wet becoming dry, work becoming bundle, tool becoming clean, room becoming still, person becoming ready to leave. The changes are gradual, and because they are gradual, The mind can follow without alarm. Sleep likes gradual things. It likes lamps dimming, sounds softening, warmth fading, and tasks resolving one by one. You check the final order after a little time. The edges are drying first, as edges do. The centers remain faintly cool. They will need longer, perhaps until morning. You make the note, leave the sheets spaced, and accept the answer. Not every task has to be forced into today. Some are properly held over, and the holding over is part of the craft. A good ending sometimes means knowing what must remain unfinished for now. That truth fits the room well. The print shop is never truly done. There will always be another order, another stack, another pot to mix, another brush to clean, another bundle to tie. The comfort is not in finishing everything forever. It is in finishing the portion that belongs to the day and leaving the rest in a condition that can be met peacefully. You do that now. The order book receives its final marks. Your pencil moves slower than in the morning. The letters are still readable, though perhaps less neat. The page records the state of things. Finished bundles on outgoing shelf. Final small order drying. Hardware labels wrapped. Fruit labels ready. These notes are modest bridges across the night. Tomorrow, someone will cross them back into work. We stay with your hand as it sets the pencil down. The fingers release it with a small heaviness. After hours of brush and paper, even a pencil can feel like one more tool, asking for precision. Now it is done. You flex your hand once, and the joints answer. There is a tired pleasure in that flex, the feeling of a day's labor gathered and acknowledged without complaint. The paste pot is covered again. The lid settles with its soft tin sound. The brush is cleaned more thoroughly this time, because there will be no more sheets tonight. Water clouds. Bristles separate. Handle wiped. Tray rinsed. Rag folded over the edge of the basin. Each act follows the last, and each act reduces the room's need for you by a little. When the tools have been washed, the bench has a bare, waiting look. It is not lonely. It is simply between uses. The table's scars show under the lamp, scratches, dark spots, rubbed edges, and pale places where paper wore the surface smooth. Tomorrow's stacks will cover them again. Tonight they are visible, and they make the bench seem older and more patient than any one worker. The drying racks hold the only active work now. Sheets lie still, doing their slow exchange with air. You step close enough to feel the cooler dampness rising from them. There is a faint scent, fresh gum drying into paper, not strong, but present. The sheets do not need your hand now. They need space, air, and time. You give them all three by leaving them alone. As you leave the final sheets to their own slow drying, the room settles around their quiet transformation, and the work continues without motion. The idea of work continuing without motion is one you understand well. Drying is work. Cooling is work. Pressing under a board is work. Gum setting into paper is work. These processes have no drama, but they change the object faithfully. The human hand begins the action, and then the materials finish it in their own time. A patient shop makes room for both kinds of labor. You take one last walk along the racks. This is not distrust, only a good habit. A corner has lifted slightly on one sheet, and you smooth the air near it without pressing the damp surface. Another sheet lies too close to its neighbor, so you shift it by the dry edge. The corrections are tiny. They may be the difference between an easy morning and a troublesome one. You make them, then let them be. The lamp's light catches motes in the air. Paper dust moves slowly, visible only where the beam holds it. It rises from the floor, drifts, and disappears into dimness. You might breathe some of it every day without thinking. Another part of the trade entering the body. The room is warm, dusty, and useful. It is not perfect, but it has served the work. A distant sound from the street enters through the window, softened by glass. A motor passing, a voice calling, a streetcar bell farther away than before. The outside evening has deepened while you were tending the last sheets. Inside, the print shop has narrowed to lamp glow, drying paper, covered paste, and your tired hands. The contrast is gentle. Two worlds, both ordinary, meeting at the door. You reach for your coat again. The fabric feels heavier after the warm room. You slide one arm in, then the other, moving slowly because there is no need for haste now. Your hat, if you wear one, rests on a peg or shelf. You take it down. Perhaps a little paper dust has settled on the brim. You brush it off with your sleeve. The gesture is automatic. Your lunch pail is empty except for crumbs and a folded wrapper. The wrapper may go home or into the scrap, depending on habit. You pick it up and feel the dry crackle. Even this paper seems related to the day's work. Once you have spent hours with paper, all paper becomes more noticeable. Its weight, fold, sound, and fiber speak more clearly than before. A co-worker still at another bench says good night, or only lifts a hand. You answer in the same low way. The room doesn't need full voices. It has had enough sound. The farewell is simple, almost part of the cleaning routine. People who share long workdays often speak economically at the end. The words carry more because they ask less. At the doorway, you look back once. The racks stand in order. The bench is clean enough. The pot is covered. The lamp holds steady. Nothing calls you back. This is a good sign. The room has released you because you have not left it in confusion. You can step away with the calm that comes from proper stopping. And as your hand leaves the doorframe, the gumming room remains behind in its warm, dim order, carrying the unfinished drying gently through the evening hours. The hallway is cooler now, and your footsteps grow softer as the gumming room falls away behind you. The smell of paste still clings faintly to your cuffs, but it is fading into wool, evening air, and the old brick scent of the building. You do not need to turn back again. The sheets have their space, the brushes have been washed, and the covered pot waits in the dimness with its quiet patience. Outside, Cincinnati has settled into lamps, window glow, and the low movement of people going home. The shop door closes with a plain wooden sound, and the street receives you without asking anything more. Somewhere behind the wall, the labels continue drying in their racks, pale backs lifting their last little moisture into the room. They do not hurry. They simply become ready. The bench stands empty under the soft lamp, showing its scratches and pale worn edges where your hands worked all day. A few motes of paper dust drift through the light, then vanish where the room grows darker. The twine rests in its place. The order book lies closed. The brush, clean and flat, keeps the shape of the work without needing to move. And in that stillness, the labor loosens its hold on you. The gum has been spread, the paper has been tended, and the small hidden side of each label has been trusted to air and time. Your hands can rest now, no longer lifting damp sheets, no longer smoothing corners, no longer listening for the brush to run dry. The room keeps the last quiet watch. The lamp is low, the racks are still, and the Label Gummer's bench in 1920s Cincinnati waits in the dark, with nothing left for you to do but let the day go.